1 month after my best friend Sam died from what everyone thought was cancer, his lawyer called me into his office and handed me a cold metal USB drive. He looked over his shoulder, locked the door, and whispered, "This is for your eyes only, Walter." Sam left strict instructions. Watch this alone and do not under any circumstances tell your wife. What Sam warned me about in that final video saved my life and exposed a cold-blooded killer living under my own roof. Before I tell you what was on that drive, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect yourself from the people who were supposed to love you. My name is Walter Jefferson. I am 68 years old, a retired mechanical engineer living in a house that feels more like a prison every single day. To my neighbors, I am just an old man driving a 20-year-old pickup truck wearing shirts with frayed collars and counting coupons at the grocery store. To my family, I am a washed-up ATM that ran out of cash a decade ago. They look at my rough hands and my oil-stained boots, and they see failure. They see a man who has nothing left to give, and I let them believe it. I never told them about the patents I hold for automotive cooling systems. I never told them that those patents were leased by a major car manufacturer 5 years ago. I never told them that while they sleep till noon, I am checking an account balance that grows by $60,000 every single month. Silence was my shield. But today, at the cemetery, silence felt like a heavy stone on my chest. We were standing at the edge of the open grave. The sky was a flat gray, but it was not raining. The air was thick and humid, the kind that makes your suit stick to your back. I was staring at the mahogany casket that held Samson Rivers, my best friend since we were barefoot kids running through the alleys of Chicago. Sam was the loud one, the flashy one. He made his money in real estate and he let everyone know it. I was the quiet one, the one who fixed things, the one who stayed in the shadows. Now he was gone. Withered away in 6 months by a stomach cancer that baffled the doctors. I felt a sharp elbow in my ribs. It was Esther, my wife of 40 years. She was wearing a black hat with a veil that looked expensive. I knew it was expensive because she had used our joint emergency fund to buy it yesterday without asking me. She leaned in close, her perfume overpowering the smell of the damp earth. "He is dead, Walter," she hissed. Her voice was low, but it carried the sharp edge of a serrated knife. "That $10,000 you lent him for that bad investment 2 years ago, it is gone now. You need to go over there and talk to his widow right now before they close the probate. You need to get our money back." I turned to look at her. Esther did not have a single tear in her eye. She was scanning the crowd, counting the luxury cars in the parking lot, calculating the cost of the flower arrangements. She looked at Sam's grieving widow, a woman sobbing into a handkerchief, and all Esther saw was a debtor. "Esther, have some dignity," I whispered back, clenching my jaw so hard my teeth ached. "The man is being lowered into the ground. We are not asking for money today. We are not asking for money ever." She pinched my arm hard enough to leave a bruise. "You are a weak old fool, Walter. That is why we are always struggling. That is why Trey and Emily have to live in that cramped apartment. Because you are too soft to take what belongs to you. Go ask her, or I will cause a scene right here." I pulled my arm away. I looked at my son Trey standing a few feet away. He was 30 years old, but he stood with his shoulders slumped, looking at his phone, ignoring the service. Next to him was Emily, his wife, my daughter-in-law. She was the only white woman in the family section, standing tall with a posture that screamed superiority. She wasn't looking at the grave either. She was watching me. Her eyes were blue ice, calculating and cold. She saw Esther pinching me. She saw my discomfort, and she smirked. A tiny, barely there smile that vanished as soon as I made eye contact. I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the heat. My friend was dead, and I was surrounded by vultures waiting to pick the bones. I walked away from the grave, leaving Esther muttering curses under her breath. I needed air. I needed to be away from the greed that radiated off my family like heat off pavement. "Mr. Jefferson." A hand grabbed my shoulder. I spun around, ready to snap, but it was Baxter, Sam's lawyer. He was a short, nervous man who always looked like he was expecting bad news. Today he looked terrified. He was sweating profusely, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "Baxter," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Good service." Sam would have hated it. Too many flowers. Baxter didn't smile. He looked around, scanning the cemetery, scanning the guests, scanning the tree line. He gripped my arm and pulled me toward the line of black limousines. "Not here, Walter. Come with me. Please. It is urgent." He dragged me behind the last car in the row, a black sedan with tinted windows. He opened the back door and practically shoved me inside, then climbed in after me and locked the doors. The air conditioning was blasting, but Baxter was still sweating. "What is going on, Baxter?" I asked, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. He reached into his jacket pocket. His hand was shaking. He pulled out a small red USB drive. It looked like a toy, something you would buy at a gas station. He pressed it into my palm and closed my fingers over it. "Sam gave this to me 3 days before he died," Baxter whispered. "He was barely lucid, Walter. He weighed maybe 100 pounds. But he grabbed my tie and he pulled me down and he made me swear on my life. He said, 'Give this to Walter. Only Walter.'" I looked at the small red device. "What is it?" Baxter swallowed hard. He said, "Tell Walter to watch it alone." He said, "Do not tell Esther. Do not tell Trey. And for the love of God, do not let that woman Emily know you have it." My heart skipped a beat. Emily. Why would Sam mention my daughter-in-law? They had barely spoken 10 words to each other in 5 years. "Why Emily?" I asked, my grip tightening on the drive. Baxter leaned in close, his eyes wide with fear. "Because Sam said he didn't have cancer, Walter. He said he was murdered. And he said the thing that killed him is inside your house right now." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The muffled sounds of the funeral service outside faded into a buzzing silence. Murdered. Sam, my strong, vibrant friend who had wasted away so quickly. "He said he was poisoned." Baxter continued, his voice trembling. "And he said he has proof. It is all on there. Watch it tonight, Walter, but be careful. If they know you have it, you are next. Now get out. Please, before anyone sees us talking." I stumbled out of the car, the red USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. I looked back toward the grave. Esther was arguing with the funeral director, probably about the price of the chairs. Trey was still on his phone. But Emily was looking right at me. She was standing 50 yards away, but I could feel her gaze. She wasn't looking at my face. She was looking at my hand, the hand that had just been in my pocket. She tilted her head slightly like a bird of prey spotting a movement in the grass. I walked back to my truck, my legs feeling heavy and numb. I did not go back to the service. I drove aimlessly for an hour, trying to process what Baxter had said. Murder, poison, Emily. It didn't make sense. Emily was arrogant, she was rude, she was entitled, but a killer. She was a 28-year-old marketing consultant who complained about broken fingernails. But Sam didn't lie. Sam never lied to me. I drove home. My house was a 2-story colonial in a neighborhood that had seen better days. It was the only asset Esther knew about, the only thing she thought we owned. I parked the truck and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. I took the USB drive out of my pocket and looked at it. It looked so innocent. I tucked it into the hidden inside pocket of my suit jacket, a pocket I had sewn myself years ago for carrying cash I didn't want Esther to find. I walked into the house. It was quiet. Too quiet. Esther and Trey were still at the repast, probably eating free food and complaining about me. I headed straight for my study, a small room off the kitchen that Esther called the junk room. It was where I kept my old drafting table, my books, and my computer. I wanted to watch the video immediately. I opened the door and froze. The room had been tossed. My papers were scattered on the floor. The drawers of my desk were pulled out and hanging at odd angles. My books were pulled off the shelves. And standing in the middle of the chaos was Emily. She didn't jump when I entered. She didn't look guilty. She turned slowly, holding a stack of my old insurance policies in her hand. She was wearing a black dress that fit her perfectly, too perfectly for a funeral. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun. "Emily," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "What are you doing in my office?" She smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a landlord catching a tenant late on rent. "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice smooth and devoid of respect. She always called me Dad with a mocking inflection. "We came back early. Trey had a headache. I was just looking for the house insurance policy." She dropped the papers back onto the desk. They scattered like dry leaves. "Insurance?" I asked, stepping into the room. "Why would you need my house insurance policy?" She walked toward me, closing the distance until she was uncomfortably close. I smelled her perfume, expensive and floral, with a chemical undertone. "Well," she said, dusting off her hands. "You are getting old, Walter. You are forgetful. You leave the stove on, you forget to lock the doors. We just wanted to make sure everything is paid up, in case of a fire." Accidents happen so easily to seniors living alone. The threat was subtle, but it was there wrapped in fake concern. Accidents happen. I am not senile, Emily, I said, standing my ground. And I am not alone. I have a wife. And I have a son. She laughed, a short, sharp sound. Oh, Walter. We both know Esther couldn't find her way out of a paper bag if there wasn't a dollar bill waiting at the exit. And Trey. Well, Trey does what he is told. She took another step closer. Her eyes dropped to my chest, to the pocket where the USB drive was hidden. My heart hammered against my ribs. Did she know? Could she see the outline? What did the lawyer give you? Walter, she asked suddenly. I kept my face stone still. A skill I learned growing up where showing fear meant getting beaten. What lawyer? Sam's lawyer. She said, her eyes narrowing. I saw him pull you into his car. I saw him give you something. Was it money? Did Sam leave you a little parting gift? She was fishing. She didn't know what it was. She thought it was money. Greed was her blind spot. He gave me a business card, Emily. I lied, keeping my voice bored. He wants to discuss the bill for the funeral arrangements. Apparently Esther ordered the premium package and didn't pay the deposit. It was a believable lie because it sounded exactly like something Esther would do. Emily studied my face for a long moment, searching for a twitch, a blink, anything. A business card, she repeated, skeptical. That is all. Now get out of my office and clean up this mess. She smiled again, a cold, predatory baring of teeth. You should be nicer to me, Walter, she said, brushing past me. Her shoulder checked mine hard enough to make me stumble slightly. We are going to be taking care of you very soon. We are going to be making all your decisions. You wouldn't want us to put you in one of those cheap facilities, would you? The ones that smell like bleach and despair. She walked to the doorway and stopped without turning around. By the way, she said, I made you some special herbal tea. It is on the kitchen counter. Trey said you looked pale. Drink it while it is hot. It is good for your memory. Maybe it will help you remember where you keep the real money. She walked away, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I stood there amidst the wreckage of my office, my hand instinctively going to my chest pocket. My heart was racing, not from exertion, but from a terrifying realization. Sam was right. The enemy wasn't out there. She was right here. I walked into the kitchen. On the counter sat a ceramic mug, steam rising from it. The tea was a dark amber color. It smelled sweet, almost sickly sweet. I sniffed it. Under the aroma of peppermint and chamomile there was something else, a faint scent of bitter almonds. I looked at the stairs where Emily had gone. I looked at the tea. I had been drinking this tea every night for 6 months. Emily had started making it for me, saying it was a blend her grandmother used. And for 6 months I had been feeling tired. My fingertips were numb. My hair was thinning faster than usual. I thought it was just aging. I thought it was stress. I picked up the mug. My hand trembled. I walked to the sink and poured it down the drain, watching the dark liquid swirl away. They weren't waiting for me to die. They were speeding up the process. I touched the USB drive again. I needed to see what was on it. Tonight. But I couldn't watch it here. Not with her watching. Not with locks she could pick. I needed to go to the only place where a man can still find privacy in his own home. The garage. I waited until midnight. I waited until I heard the heavy snoring of Esther beside me and the silence from the guest room where Trey and Emily stayed. I crept out of bed, moving with the silent grace of a man who has spent a lifetime avoiding conflict. I grabbed my old laptop from the study and went down to the garage. My garage was my sanctuary. It was filled with tools, grease, and the smell of old metal. It was where I restored my truck. It was where I invented the cooling system that made me a millionaire. It was the one place Emily refused to enter because she said it smelled like poverty. I sat on my workbench and plugged in the USB drive. A single file appeared, videofinal.mp4. I put on my headphones and clicked play. Sam's face filled the screen. He looked terrible. His skin was gray, his eyes sunken, his cheeks hollow. He was sitting in a hospital bed, tubes running into his arms. He looked like a ghost. Walter, he rasped, his voice weak. If you are watching this, I am gone, and you are in danger. He coughed a dry, rattling sound that made my own chest hurt. They told me it was stomach cancer. But I hired a private investigator, Walter. I didn't trust it. I was healthy as a horse 6 months ago. The PI found traces. Thallium. It is a heavy metal poison, colorless, odorless, tasteless. Except for a slight metallic tang, I froze. Thallium. The poisoner's poison. My wife did it. Sam said, tears leaking from his eyes. My wife and my son. They wanted the estate. They didn't want to wait. But Walter... That is not why I am making this video. He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes intense. The PI found something else. He tapped my wife's phone. He recorded a call. She wasn't working alone. She was getting advice. She was getting the dosage instructions from someone else. Someone who told her exactly how to mix it so it looks like a natural illness. Sam took a shuddering breath. It was Emily Walter, your daughter-in-law. I heard her voice. She was laughing. She told my wife, use this formula. My father-in-law has been drinking it for months, and the doctors just think he is getting old. He will be dead by Christmas. The laptop screen blurred as tears filled my eyes. My stomach churned. The numbness in my fingers suddenly felt like fire. Walter Sam whispered, "They are killing us. They are culling the herd. You need to run. You need to go to the police. But be careful. Emily is smarter than them. She is the architect. Do not let her know you know." The video ended. The screen went black. I sat there in the dark garage, the silence pressing in on me. The hum of the refrigerator in the corner sounded like a scream. My daughter-in-law was not just a gold digger. She was a murderer. She had killed my best friend by proxy, and she was killing me slowly, cup by cup. Suddenly, the garage door handle turned. It rattled violently. It was locked. Walter Esther's voice came through the door, muffled but angry. "Walter, what are you doing in there? Open this door." Then a second voice, smooth, calm, terrifying. "Dad," Emily called out. "Are you okay in there? We heard a noise. Open up. I brought you another cup of tea. You really need to sleep." I stared at the door. I stared at the USB drive. I wasn't going to open it. Not tonight. I was Walter Jefferson. I had built engines that could withstand extreme heat and pressure. I had survived poverty, discrimination, and a lifetime of being underestimated. They thought they were killing a helpless old man. They were about to find out they were trying to dismantle a bomb. I pulled the USB drive out and hid it inside the hollow handle of my favorite wrench. I wiped my face. I stood up. "I am coming," I shouted back, my voice steady. "Just checking the water heater." I walked toward the door, ready to face the monsters on the other side. The game had changed, and I had the first move. I locked the garage door again and verified that the deadbolt was engaged before retreating to the furthest corner of my workshop. The air in the garage was cold and smelled of old oil and sawdust, a scent that usually brought me peace, but tonight it felt like the inside of a tomb. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to plug the red USB drive back into the side of my laptop. I put my headphones on, pressing them tight against my ears to ensure not a single sound escaped into the house. I needed to hear every word Sam had to say. I needed to understand the anatomy of his murder because I had a sinking feeling it was becoming the blueprint for my own. I clicked play and Sam's face filled the screen again. The resolution was grainy, but it could not hide the devastation the sickness had wreaked on his body. His cheekbones protruded sharply beneath papery gray skin, and his eyes, usually full of mischief, were sunken and dull. He looked into the camera lens with an intensity that reached through the screen and grabbed me by the throat. "Walter," he said, his voice a dry rasp that sounded like dead leaves skittering on pavement. "You need to listen to me very carefully. The doctors kept telling me it was aggressive stomach cancer. They said it was just bad luck. But I know my body. I knew something was wrong when my hair started falling out in clumps, not from chemo, but before the diagnosis even came. I knew something was wrong when my fingertips went numb, like I had dipped them in ice water and left them there." I paused the video. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Numb fingertips. I looked down at my own hands, my rough, dark hands that had built engines and fixed transmissions for 40 years. I rubbed my thumb against the pads of my fingers. There was a dullness there, a lack of sensation that I had attributed to arthritis or perhaps the early onset of diabetes. I had ignored it, telling myself it was just part of getting old. I pressed play again. Sam continued. "I hired a private toxicologist, Walter. I paid him in cash and I used a fake name. He found thallium in my blood. Thallium. They call it the poisoner's poison because it is colorless and odorless and it dissolves perfectly in water or tea. It mimics a dozen other illnesses. It causes nerve damage, it causes fatigue, and it causes alopecia. Alopecia. Hair loss. I slowly reached up to my head. I ran my hand through my short gray hair. It was a habit I had when I was thinking, a nervous tic I had carried since childhood. But this time, as my fingers brushed against my scalp, I felt no resistance. I pulled my hand away and looked at my palm. There, in the center of my calloused hand, lay a thick clump of my own hair. I stared at it, my breath catching in my throat. It had come out effortlessly, painlessly. I hadn't even felt it detach. I ran my hand through my hair again, a little harder this time. Another clump came away, then another. I looked at the concrete floor beneath my stool. In the dim light, I could see them now, little gray tufts of hair scattered like dust bunnies around my feet. I wasn't just getting old. I wasn't just stressed. I was being murdered. I looked back at the screen. Sam was weeping, now silent tears tracking through the hollows of his cheeks. By the time I found out, it was too late for me, Walter. The damage to my internal organs was irreversible. My kidneys were shutting down. But you still have time. If you are watching this, it means Baxter got to you. Check your symptoms. Walter, check your hair. Check your hands. If you feel the tingling, if you see the hair loss, they have already started. Do not eat anything they give you. Do not drink anything they brew. Run, Walter. Run for your life. The video ended, leaving me sitting in the terrifying silence of my garage, staring at the hair in my hand. The realization washed over me like a bucket of ice water. The fatigue that made it hard to get out of bed in the morning. The stomach cramps I blamed on Esther's cooking. The pins and needles in my feet. It was all real. It was all part of a calculated plan to erase me from existence. Suddenly, the handle of the door from the kitchen rattled violently. "Dad, open up. It is me, Trey." I jumped, slamming the laptop shut and shoving it under a pile of schematics on my workbench. I swept the loose hair from my hand onto the floor and kicked it under the table. My heart was racing so fast I felt dizzy. "Dad, come on. Mom says you have been down here for hours." I took a deep breath, forcing my face into a mask of annoyance. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Trey stood there, bathed in the warm yellow light of the kitchen. He looked so much like me at that age, the same broad shoulders, the same set of the jaw, but his eyes were different. They were weak, shifty. He was holding a large, steaming mug in his hands. "What do you want, Trey?" I asked, my voice gruff. "I am working." Trey stepped into the garage uninvited. He looked around, his eyes darting to the workbench, then back to me. He seemed nervous, sweating slightly, even though the house was cool. "Mom is worried about you," he said, holding the mug out toward me. "She said you looked really pale at the funeral. She thinks you are coming down with something." "Esther thinks I am coming down with something," I repeated dryly. "Since when does Esther care about my health unless she is worried about who will pay the electric bill?" Trey flinched, but he forced a smile. It was a practiced smile, one he used when he wanted to borrow money. "Come on, Dad. Emily made this for you. It is her special herbal blend. She says it helps with circulation and energy. She saw you rubbing your hands together earlier. She thinks you might have poor circulation." Emily. Of course. The architect of my demise. I looked at the mug. Steam curled up from the dark liquid. It looked innocent. It looked like love. "I am not thirsty," I said, turning back to my workbench. "I just want to finish this project." Trey followed me. He was persistent tonight. Usually he would give up at the first sign of resistance, but tonight he had a mission. "Dad, please," he said, his voice taking on a whining edge. "Emily will be upset if you don't drink it. She spent a long time brewing this. She says you need to keep your strength up. You are the patriarch of the family, right? We need you healthy." The hypocrisy made my stomach turn. We need you healthy. What he meant was, we need you pliable. We need you dead on our schedule, not yours. I turned to face him. He was holding the mug out with both hands like an offering. I looked into my son's eyes, searching for a trace of the little boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy I had carried on my shoulders. I saw nothing. I saw only a man who was afraid of his wife and desperate for an inheritance he hadn't earned. "Fine," I said, snatching the mug from his hands. "Give it here." Trey relaxed visibly. His shoulders dropped. "Good. Drink it while it is hot, Dad. It works better that way." He stood there watching me. He wasn't leaving. He was going to wait until I drank it. He needed to report back to his master that the dose had been administered. I lifted the mug to my lips. As the steam hit my face, I smelled it. Beneath the strong scent of peppermint and something earthy, there was a sharp, distinct odor. Bitter almonds. It was faint, masked by the other ingredients, but to a man who had spent his life working with chemicals and solvents, it was unmistakable. Sam's voice echoed in my head. Do not drink anything they brew. I held the mug just below my nose, feigning a deep inhale. Smells strong. I grunted. It is potent stuff, Trey said, shuffling his feet. Just chug it, Dad. It is like medicine. I tilted the mug. I let the liquid touch my lips. I opened my mouth slightly and took a large mouthful, holding the hot liquid in my cheeks without swallowing. It tasted metallic and wrong. I lowered the mug and made a show of swallowing loud and hard while actually keeping the poison pooled under my tongue. I grimaced. That is terrible, I choked out. Trey laughed, a nervous tittering sound. Yeah, Emily said it tastes bad, but that means it is working. Finish it up. I need a chaser, I rasped. This taste is awful. Go get me a glass of water from the kitchen. Trey hesitated. He looked at the mug, which was still mostly full. Just finish it, Dad. I slammed the mug down on the workbench hard enough to make liquid slosh over the rim. I said, get me some water, boy, I barked, channeling the anger that was boiling inside me. Unless you want to drink this slop yourself. Trey recoiled. He had always been afraid of my temper, even though I rarely used it. Okay. I will get you water. Jesus. He turned and hurried back into the house, leaving the door slightly ajar. The second he was out of sight, I grabbed the dirty rag I used to clean oil off my tools. I spat the mouthful of tea into the rag, wiping my tongue frantically to remove the residue. The rag absorbed the dark liquid, leaving a stain that looked like old blood. I looked around for a place to dump the rest. I couldn't pour it down the sink in the garage because the pipes rattled and Trey would hear. I couldn't throw it on the floor. My eyes landed on the corner where Emily had insisted on storing some of her delicate potted plants during the winter renovation of the patio. There was a large, expensive-looking fern that she prized above all else. I walked over to it and poured the contents of the mug into the soil right at the base of the plant. The earth drank it up greedily. I went back to the workbench and sat down just as Trey returned with a glass of water. I took the water and drank it greedily, washing the metallic taste out of my mouth. I swallowed it for real this time. Where is the tea? Trey asked, looking at the empty mug on the bench. I drank it. I lied, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. Happy now. Trey smiled. A genuine smile of relief. Yeah, Dad, I am happy. You will feel better in no time. Emily says it takes about 30 minutes to really kick in. I bet it does, I thought. You should go to bed now, Trey said. You look tired. I am tired, I said. Go on. I will be up in a minute. Trey picked up the empty mug. I will wash this for you. Good night, Dad. Good night, son, I said. He walked out, closing the door behind him. I listened to his footsteps fading up the stairs. I sat there in the silence, my heart heavy with grief. My son, my own flesh and blood, had just handed me a cup of death and watched with a smile as he thought I consumed it. He was not just weak, he was complicit. I looked at the fern in the corner. I knew that by morning it would be dead. It would be the first physical proof I had. But I needed more. I needed to know exactly how much poison was in my system. I needed to know how much time I had left before my kidneys failed like Sam's. And I needed to know where they were getting it. I pulled the laptop back out. I had to finish the video. I had to see the rest of the evidence. But as I reached for the mouse, my hand brushed against my scalp again. Another clump of hair fell onto the keyboard. I stared at it. The anger in my chest hardened into something cold and solid. They wanted me dead. They wanted my money. They wanted to erase Walter Jefferson from the earth. But they had made a fatal error. They assumed I was already gone. They assumed the old man in the garage was helpless. I picked up the clump of hair and put it in a small plastic sample bag I used for screws. This wasn't trash. This was evidence. I was going to survive this, and I was going to make sure that every drop of poison they tried to force down my throat would be paid for 1,000 times over. I opened a new browser window on my laptop. I didn't search for doctors. I didn't search for the police. Not yet. I searched for the current market value of the land my house sat on. And then I searched for the name of the most ruthless estate lawyer in the city. If they wanted a war over my legacy, I would give them one. But they were going to find out that the legacy of Walter Jefferson was not a pile of cash they could steal. It was a trap, and they had just walked right into it. The morning sun filtered through the dusty blinds of the living room, casting long shadows across the floor. I stood there holding the cold mug of tea that I had managed to avoid drinking the night before. The liquid was dark and murky, a lethal cocktail disguised as a gesture of care. I looked around the room, ensuring I was alone. My eyes landed on the expensive Japanese bonsai tree that Emily had bought a month ago. She had placed it on the center table, claiming it brought sophistication to the house. It was a delicate thing worth more than my truck, and she fussed over it daily, misting its leaves and pruning its branches with obsessive care. I walked over to the plant. "I am sorry, little one," I whispered. I tilted the mug and poured the poisoned tea directly into the soil at the base of the twisted trunk. The dry earth drank it up greedily. I watched until the last drop disappeared, leaving only a dark stain on the decorative white stones. I heard footsteps on the stairs, heavy, purposeful steps. It was Emily. She walked into the living room wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. Her hair was messy and her eyes were puffy with sleep, but the moment she saw me standing there fully dressed and alert, her expression shifted. It wasn't just surprise, it was shock bordering on anger. She stopped dead in her tracks, her hand gripping the banister until her knuckles turned white. "You are up," she said, her voice flat. I turned to her, forcing a senile smile onto my face. "Good morning, Emily. I slept like a log. That tea really did the trick. I feel energized." I saw her eyes dart to the empty mug in my hand, then back to my face. She was searching for signs of weakness. She was looking for the tremors, the confusion, the sickness that Sam had described in his video. But I stood tall, my shoulders squared, my hands steady. "You drank it all?" she asked, skepticism dripping from her words. Every drop, I lied, patting my stomach. "It was delicious. A little bitter, but you know what they say. The worse it tastes, the better it works." She stared at me for a long, uncomfortable silence. Then she muttered something under her breath. It was fast and low slang that she probably thought an old man like me wouldn't catch. She called me a cockroach. She said something about needing a stronger boot. "What was that, dear?" I asked, cupping my ear. "Nothing." "Dad," she snapped, her voice sharpening. "I am just surprised. Usually old people have trouble sleeping. I thought you would be groggy." She walked past me into the kitchen, brushing against my arm with unnecessary force. I followed her, moving slowly, playing the part. She started slamming cabinet doors, pulling out coffee mugs with violent movements. She was rattled. The poison was supposed to be working. I was supposed to be bedridden by now, vomiting and weak. The fact that I was walking around humming a tune was a variable she hadn't calculated. I sat at the kitchen table and watched her. She turned on the coffee maker, her back to me. I could see her reflection in the window above the sink. She was biting her lip. Her eyes narrowed in thought. She was recalculating. She was realizing that the subtle approach wasn't fast enough. Trey came down a few minutes later. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, and he jumped when the toaster popped up. He poured himself a coffee and sat opposite me, avoiding my gaze. Emily placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezing it hard. It was a signal, a command. "Ask him," she whispered. Trey cleared his throat. He looked at Emily, then at me. He looked like a man being marched to the gallows. "Dad," he started, his voice cracking, "we need to talk." I took a sip of water, watching them. "Here it comes," I thought. "What is it, son?" "We are in trouble, Dad. Big trouble." He leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. They were shaking. "I made a mistake, Dad, a bad one. I borrowed some money for a business investment, a tech startup. It was a sure thing. Everyone said it was going to double in a month." I looked at Emily. She was leaning against the counter, her arms crossed, watching me with the intensity of a hawk. "And let me guess," I said, keeping my voice calm. "It didn't double." Trey shook his head. "No. The guys running it. They took off. And the people I borrowed the money from. They aren't banks, Dad. They are bad people. Dangerous people. They said if I don't pay them back by tomorrow, they are going to hurt me. They are going to hurt Emily." He buried his face in his hands. It was a good performance. If I hadn't seen his bank statements on the USB drive, if I didn't know about the luxury vacations and the online gambling, I might have believed him. How much, I asked. $50,000, he whispered through his fingers. 50,000. It was a specific number. It was exactly the amount I had in my visible retirement savings, the nest egg I had told Esther about years ago for emergencies. "They want it today, Dad," Emily cut in, her voice sharp and urgent. "Or they are coming to the house." I looked from my son to his wife. They were lying. There were no loan sharks. There was no failed startup. There was only greed. I knew from Sam's files that Emily had her eye on a luxury timeshare in the Caribbean. The deposit was exactly $50,000. They weren't trying to save their lives. They were trying to fund their lifestyle before I died. I leaned back in my chair. The wood creaked. "I don't have $50,000 lying around, son," I said. "You know that." Esther walked into the kitchen at that moment. She was wearing her church clothes even though it was Tuesday. She sensed the tension immediately. She looked at Trey's hunched form and Emily's angry stance. "What is going on?" she demanded. "He won't help us," Emily said, turning to Esther. Her voice shifted instantly from aggressive to victimized. "Trey is in danger, Mom. Dangerous men are coming for him. And Walter won't help. He is sitting on that retirement fund, letting it rot while his son is in danger." Esther's eyes went wide. She turned on me like a viper. "Is that true, Walter? Are you going to let them hurt our boy?" "It is a lie, Esther," I said, my voice rising slightly. "There are no loan sharks. Look at his shoes. Look at her purse. Does that look like poverty to you? They want the money for themselves." "Don't you dare call my son a liar," Esther screamed. She grabbed a ceramic bowl from the counter, the one she used for fruit, and hurled it at the floor. It shattered into 100 pieces, the sound exploding in the small kitchen. I flinched, but I didn't move from my chair. "You are a selfish, miserable old man," Esther spat, her face twisting with ugliness. "You have always been cheap. You hoard every penny while we struggle. What are you saving it for, Walter? You are going to die soon anyway. Why can't you do one good thing with your life?" Her words hung in the air, brutal and honest. "You are going to die soon anyway." That was the truth of it. To them, I was already a corpse. I was just taking too long to stop breathing. "I am not giving him the money," I said, my voice cold and hard. "If he owes money to criminals, he should go to the police. Or he should get a job." Trey looked up, his eyes wet with fake tears. "Dad, please." "They will kill me." "Then you better start running," I said. Emily pushed off the counter. She walked over to the table and slammed her hand down right next to my plate. "You are going to regret this," she hissed. "You think you are safe because you are the patriarch, but you are nothing. You are a guest in this house, and guests who don't pay their way get evicted." She grabbed Trey by the arm and hauled him up. "Come on, Trey, let's go. Your father has made his choice. He cares more about his bank account than his own flesh and blood." They stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with Esther. She stood amidst the broken pottery, her chest heaving. She looked at me with a hatred that chilled my blood. "You are dead to me, Walter," she whispered. "Do not speak to me. Do not come into my room. You sleep in the garage from now on. That is where trash belongs." She turned and walked away, leaving me sitting in the silence. The isolation had begun. They had drawn the battle lines. They thought they had broken me. They thought that by cutting me off, by screaming and threatening, they would force me to surrender. But they were wrong. I looked at the shattered bowl on the floor. I looked at the empty chair where my son had sat and lied to my face. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The last thread of obligation, the last remnant of hope that my family could be saved had just snapped. I stood up and walked to the sink. I washed my cup. I dried my hands. They wanted a war. They wanted to treat me like an enemy. Fine. I would show them what happens when you corner a man who has nothing left to lose. I walked out of the kitchen, past the dying bonsai tree, and headed for the garage. It was time to make a phone call. It was time to execute the plan Sam had died to give me. The morning sun filtered through the dusty blinds of the living room, casting long shadows across the floor where the expensive Japanese bonsai tree stood. Or rather, where it had stood. What remained in the pot was a skeletal effigy of the vibrant plant that had been there just yesterday. The leaves were not just wilted, they were scorched, a sickly shade of brown that looked like dried tobacco. They littered the white decorative stones like the fallout from a miniature nuclear explosion. The trunk, which had been a rich, healthy brown, was now gray and shrunken, as if every drop of moisture had been violently sucked out of it. I stood there staring at the devastation with a cold knot in my stomach. I had poured the tea into that soil less than 10 hours ago. 10 hours. That was all it took for the poison to completely destroy a living thing. I imagined that liquid inside my body coursing through my veins, filtering through my kidneys. It was a terrifying thought. If I had drunk that cup as Trey and Emily had intended, I would not be standing here. I would be in a hospital bed just like Sam, wondering why my body was failing me. This was the physical proof I needed. It was no longer a theory. It was no longer just a grainy video on a USB drive. It was a dead plant in my living room. A silent witness to the murder attempt that had taken place in my own kitchen. I reached out and touched one of the branches. It snapped with a dry crack that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet house. Thallium sulfate, that was what Sam had called it. A heavy metal salt, colorless, odorless, tasteless, and absolutely lethal. It worked by interfering with the body's potassium absorption, essentially starving the cells until they died. I looked at the dead bonsai and saw my own future if I did not act fast. "Walter, what did you do?" Esther's voice cut through the silence like a whip. She was standing at the bottom of the stairs, wearing her bathrobe, her hair in rollers. She was looking at the plant with a mixture of horror and accusation. I turned to her, forcing my face into an expression of confused senility. I hunched my shoulders slightly, playing the part of the bumbling old man they all believed I was. "I don't know, Esther," I stammered. "I just woke up and found it like this. Maybe it got too much sun, or maybe not enough water." "You old fool," Esther hissed, marching across the room. She inspected the plant, her nose wrinkling. "Emily is going to be furious. That tree cost $300. You probably overwatered it. You ruin everything you touch, Walter. You are clumsy and you are useless." She poked a finger into my chest. Her nail was sharp. "You are going to tell her," she ordered. "You are going to tell her that you messed up. I am not taking the heat for your incompetence." I looked at my wife. There was no love in her eyes, only contempt. She didn't care that I was alive. She only cared about the price of a decorative tree. "I will tell her," I said, lowering my head. "I am sorry, Esther. My mind isn't what it used to be. It certainly isn't," she snapped, turning on her heel. "Clean this mess up before breakfast. I don't want to look at it." She stormed into the kitchen, leaving me alone with the corpse of the bonsai. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost made me dizzy, but I pushed it down. I had to stay focused. I had to stay in character. I swept up the dead leaves and threw the entire plant into the trash bin outside, burying it under bags of garbage so no one would inspect the soil. I knew Emily wouldn't bother to check. She would just see it as another sign of my decline, another reason to put me away. Dinner that night was a tense affair. The air in the dining room was thick enough to choke on. Emily had barely spoken a word since she discovered the missing plant. She had just looked at me with those cold blue eyes, shaking her head as if I were a disappointing child. Trey sat next to her, picking at his food, his eyes glued to his plate. He knew. He knew what had been in that cup, and he was terrified that I was still walking around. We were eating meatloaf. I had watched Esther make it, so I knew it was safe, but I still took small bites, chewing slowly, my senses on high alert for any strange tastes or smells. Suddenly, Emily cleared her throat. She reached under the table and pulled out a stack of glossy brochures. She slapped them down on the table right next to my water glass. The top one had a picture of a smiling elderly couple sitting in wheelchairs looking out at a parking lot. The text in bold, cheerful letters read, "Sunshine Meadows Assisted Living, affordable care for the twilight years." "What is this?" I asked, putting my fork down. Emily smiled. It was a tight, patronizing smile, the kind a teacher gives a slow student. "We have been talking, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "After what happened with the bonsai tree today and the way you have been acting lately, we think it is time to consider some options. We think you need more help than we can give you here." I looked at the brochure. It looked cheap. It looked like a warehouse for the unwanted. "I don't need help," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I am fine. It was just a plant, Emily." "It is not just a plant," Walter Esther chimed in. "You are forgetful. You are clumsy. And frankly, you are becoming a burden. This place looks nice. They have activities. They have nurses." Emily leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. She looked at me with an expression that I can only describe as anthropological, like she was studying a different species. "Look, Dad," she said, speaking slowly and enunciating every word as if I didn't understand English. "We want what is best for you." This place is specifically designed for people like you, people who are getting a little confused, people who need structure. They know how to handle the elderly when they get difficult. The way she said people like you made my skin crawl. There was a subtext there, a racial and social condescension that she didn't even try to hide. She was the educated white woman explaining the world to the ignorant black man. She saw my worn clothes and my calloused hands, and she assumed I was simple. She assumed I belonged in a facility where I would be fed mush and parked in front of a television until I expired. She had no idea that the man she was talking to held 3 engineering patents. She had no idea that I could solve complex calculus problems in my head. She had no idea that I owned the building her favorite coffee shop rented space from. It is very affordable, Emily continued, tapping a manicured fingernail on the price list. Your pension would cover most of it, and we would handle the rest of your finances to make sure everything is paid. It would be a load off your mind. You wouldn't have to worry about bills or maintenance or anything. You could just relax. Relax. That was code for die quietly. They wanted to stick me in a cheap hole so they could siphon off my assets. They wanted access to the house. They wanted my truck. They wanted my Social Security checks. I picked up the brochure and looked at it. The rooms looked like prison cells with floral curtains. I am not going anywhere, I said, dropping the brochure back onto the table. This is my house. I paid for it. I built the addition with my own hands. I am staying right here. Emily's smile vanished. Her eyes hardened into flint. It is not really your choice anymore, Dad, she said, her voice losing its sugary coating. I looked at Trey. He was shrinking into his chair, trying to make himself invisible. Trey, I said, my voice hard, do you agree with this? Do you want to put your father in a home? Trey looked up, his eyes wet and fearful. He looked at Emily, then at me. It might be for the best, Dad, he mumbled. You know, for your safety. For my safety. The irony was suffocating. The only threat to my safety was sitting right next to him. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I am not going, I stated firmly. I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself, and I am not signing any papers. Emily stood up too. She was tall in her heels, looming over the table. Sit down, Walter, she ordered. We are not done discussing this. I am done, I said, turning to leave. You listen to me, she hissed, her voice rising. If you don't agree to go voluntarily, we will make you go. Do you think you have a choice? You are an old man with no friends and a history of erratic behavior. I stopped and turned back to face her. Erratic behavior, I asked. What erratic behavior? Emily laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. Oh, Walter, you don't remember, do you? That is exactly the problem. You leave the stove on, you wander around at night, you get aggressive. Just last week you threatened the mailman. I stared at her. None of that had happened. Not a single thing. You are lying, I said. Am I? She challenged, crossing her arms. Who are they going to believe, Walter? A respectable young couple and your own wife who is terrified for her safety, or a senile old man who hallucinates? She pulled out her phone. I have the number for Adult Protective Services right here, she said, her thumb hovering over the screen. All I have to do is make one call. I will tell them you are a danger to yourself and others. I will tell them you can't feed yourself. I will tell them you get violent when you are confused. She took a step toward me, using her height and her presence as a weapon. They will come here, Walter. They will evaluate you. And when they see the state of your room, which I might add is a pigsty, they will take you away. And they won't put you in Sunshine Meadows. They will put you in the state ward. Do you know what happens in the state ward, Walter? People disappear there. I looked at Esther. She was nodding in agreement, her lips pursed. It is true, Walter, she said. You have been getting worse. We are just trying to help you avoid the state home. Emily is doing you a favor. I felt the walls closing in. It was a setup, a perfect trap. They had been planting the seeds for months, telling neighbors I was slipping, telling the doctor I was confused. If she called social services now, they would walk into a house where the wife and son corroborated everything. I would be outnumbered. I would be dragged out of my own home in handcuffs if I resisted. I looked at Emily's phone. It was a modern weapon more dangerous than a gun in her hands. You wouldn't, I said, my voice low. Try me, she whispered. We have the paperwork ready, Walter. We just need you to be cooperative. If you sign the power of attorney and agree to the move, we can make this comfortable. If you fight us, we will declare you incompetent. We will strip you of your rights. You won't even be allowed to buy a stick of gum without our permission. She smiled again. and this time it was triumphant. "So what is it going to be, Dad? Sunshine Meadows or the psych ward?" I clenched my fists at my sides. My fingernails dug into my palms. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw them out. But I knew I couldn't win a physical fight. Not against the three of them. Not against the lies they had already spun. I needed time. I needed to get to my lawyer. I needed to access my secret funds. I took a deep breath, forcing my shoulders to slump, forcing the fight out of my eyes. "I need to think about it," I muttered, looking at the floor. "You have until tomorrow morning," Emily said, slipping her phone back into her pocket. "Think hard, Walter, because tomorrow the moving truck comes whether you are packed or not." She sat back down and picked up her fork, resuming her meal as if she hadn't just threatened to destroy my life. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I felt their eyes on my back. I felt their victory. But as I walked into the dark hallway, I reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal of the wrench handle where the USB drive was hidden. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I was a helpless old man. They didn't know that Walter Jefferson never went into a negotiation without leverage. And tomorrow morning, I wasn't going to be packed. I was going to be gone. I slipped out the back door while Trey and Emily were out, and Esther was distracted by her television shows. I drove my old truck to the other side of town to a nondescript clinic in a strip mall. It was run by Arthur, an old friend from my Army days who had become a doctor. He was the only medical professional I trusted because he owed me his life from a firefight in '72. Arthur didn't ask questions when I told him I needed a full toxicology screen off the books. He saw the desperation in my eyes. I sat on the crinkling paper of the exam table while he drew vials of blood. My arm looked thin, the veins prominent and dark. I felt weak. Every movement was an effort, as if I were moving through water. I waited in the small office for an hour, staring at the diplomas on the wall. When Arthur came back, his face was pale. He held a clipboard against his chest like a shield. "Walter," he said, his voice grave. "You need to go to the hospital, right now. Just give me the numbers, Arthur." I said, my voice steady despite the fear gripping my heart. He slammed the clipboard down on the desk. "The numbers are lethal, Walter. Your thallium levels are critical. It is a miracle you are even walking. Your kidneys are functioning at 60%. Your liver is inflamed. If you ingest any more of that stuff, your organs are going to shut down one by one. It will be painful, and it will be fast." He walked around the desk and gripped my shoulder. His hand was shaking. 2 weeks, Walter. Maybe less. That is what you have left if you don't get treatment immediately. This is attempted murder. Why won't you let me call the police?" I looked at my old friend. I saw the fear in his eyes. He didn't want to watch me die. "Because if the police show up now, they will claim it was an accident," I said. "They will say I was senile and took the wrong meds. Or they will blame each other and get off with a slap on the wrist. I need them to hang Arthur. I need them to expose themselves completely. I need undeniable proof that they are doing this with malice." Arthur rubbed his face. "You are playing a dangerous game, Walter. You are using your own life as bait." "It is the only chip I have left," I replied. "Can you give me something? Something to neutralize it? Or at least slow it down?" Arthur sighed. He went to a cabinet and pulled out a bottle of pills. Prussian blue. It binds to the thallium in your gut and helps your body excrete it. It is not a cure-all, but it might buy you some time. Take these, and drink water. Gallons of it. You need to flush your system. I took the bottle and hid it in my pocket. "Thank you, Arthur." He didn't smile. "Don't thank me yet. Just don't die." I drove back home with the taste of bile in my throat. The diagnosis was a death sentence with a loophole. 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks to dismantle my son's life before he ended mine. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked peaceful, but I knew it was a lie. I entered through the kitchen and walked toward my study. The door was ajar. I knew I had closed it. I always closed it. I pushed the door open and froze. The room was a disaster zone. Papers were everywhere. Books were thrown off the shelves. But what made my blood freeze was the sight of the wall safe. The painting that usually covered it was on the floor. The safe door was wide open, hanging on its hinges. It hadn't been cracked. It had been pried open with a crowbar. The metal was twisted and scarred, and standing there amidst the wreckage was Emily. She was breathing hard, her hair falling out of its perfect bun. She held a small blue book in her hands. My old savings passbook, the one I had left there specifically for this moment. It was a decoy, a trap for greedy rats. She turned when she heard me. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look scared. She looked like a wild animal that had been cornered and found no food. Her eyes were wide and manic. "Where is it?" she screamed. I stood in the doorway, blocking her exit. "Where is what, Emily?" "The money," she shrieked, shaking the blue book at me. "The real money. This is a joke." She threw the book. It hit me square in the chest and fell to the floor. I looked down at it. It was a passbook for a local credit union account I had opened in 1985. The balance was printed clearly on the last line, $5,240. "Is that all there is?" she yelled, stepping over the pile of books she had destroyed. "You worked for 40 years. You were an engineer. You act like you are so superior. And this is it, $5,000. I looked at her. I saw the desperation radiating off her. She was vibrating with it. The poison wasn't working fast enough. The bills were piling up. The loan sharks were calling. And now she thought the pot of gold she had been killing for was empty. "That is my life savings," I said, my voice calm. "It is enough for a funeral." "Enough for a funeral," she laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "It is not enough for anything, Walter. It is not enough to pay off Trey's debts. It is not enough for my house. It is not enough to make this misery worth it." She kicked the desk. "We thought you were hoarding it. We thought you were a miser. But you are just a failure." The word hung in the air. Failure. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. She saw a man who had wasted her time. She saw a murder that wasn't going to pay out. "You are useless," she spat. "A useless, broke old man. Why couldn't you just die? Why couldn't you just leave us something? Anything?" She was unraveling. The mask of the sophisticated daughter-in-law was gone. The pretense of care was gone. There was only raw, naked greed and fury. I looked at her and I realized something terrifying. They were out of time. They couldn't wait 2 weeks. They couldn't wait for the thallium to do its slow work. They needed money now. If they thought there was no money, they might just cut their losses and leave. But if they thought I was hiding it, I decided to twist the knife. I spent it. I lied. I spent it all on Esther. On this house. On Trey's education. What did you expect, Emily? Did you think I was sitting on a gold mine? Her face twisted. "You are lying. You have to be lying. Sam was rich. You were his partner. You have to have more." "Sam was lucky," I said. "I was just a worker." She lunged at me. She grabbed the lapels of my jacket and shook me. She was strong, fueled by adrenaline and rage. "You are holding out on us," she hissed, her face inches from mine. "I know you are. Old men like you always have a stash." "Where is it, Walter? Is it under the floorboards? Is it in the garden? Tell me." I pushed her away. She stumbled back, hitting the wall. "Get out of my office," I said, my voice low and dangerous. She straightened up, smoothing her dress. Her eyes regained that cold, calculating look I had seen at the funeral. The hysteria faded, replaced by a chilling resolve. "Fine," she said. "Keep your secrets. But remember this, Walter. Failed investments get liquidated." She walked past me, stopping at the door to pick up the blue bank book. She looked at it one last time and sneered. $5,000. That won't even cover the cleanup." She threw the book onto the floor and walked away. I stood there in the ruin of my study, listening to her footsteps retreat. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my mind was clear. They were done playing games. They were done with the slow poison. Emily's reaction told me everything I needed to know. They were desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. But desperate people are also dangerous. I picked up the blue book. $5,000. That was all she saw. She didn't see the man. She didn't see the father. She just saw a number that was too small. I needed to change the narrative. I needed to become a bigger target, a juicier target. If they thought I was broke, they might just kill me out of spite. But if they thought I was about to cash out, if they thought I was about to sell something worth millions, then they would keep me alive long enough to sign the papers. I needed to make a phone call. I needed to dangle a carrot so big they wouldn't be able to resist it. And when they lunged for it, I would be waiting with the trap. I reached into my pocket and touched the bottle of Prussian blue pills Arthur had given me. 2 weeks. I didn't have 2 weeks. I probably had days. I walked out of the study, leaving the mess on the floor. I didn't care about the papers anymore. I cared about survival, and I cared about vengeance. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I swallowed 2 of the blue pills. The war had entered a new phase. They wanted money. I would show them money. I would show them so much money it would blind them. And then while they were staring at the gold, I would kick the stool out from under them. I sat in the kitchen the next morning watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of sunlight that hit the table. The silence in the house was heavy, not peaceful but pregnant with threat. Emily hadn't spoken to me since she threw the bank book at my feet. Trey was avoiding me entirely, probably hiding in the guest room. Esther was in the living room aggressively vacuuming the same spot over and over again, her way of broadcasting her anger. I touched the bottle of Prussian blue pills in my pocket. They were my only shield against the thallium coursing through my veins, but they were working too slowly. I felt the tingle in my fingertips, a constant reminder that the clock was ticking. I realized then that my strategy of playing the broke failure was dangerous. I had pushed them too far into desperation. When a predator realizes the prey has no meat on its bones, it kills it just to stop the chase. Emily was done waiting. If she thought I was penniless, she had no reason to keep me alive. She might decide to accelerate the process to stage an accident just to collect on the small life insurance policy I had through the union. I needed to change the game. I needed to become valuable again. I needed to be worth more alive than dead, at least for a few more days. I needed to dangle a bait so large, so glittering, that it would blind them to everything else. I needed to turn their greed into my protection. I looked at my old flip phone on the table. It was scratched and outdated, the kind of phone a broke old man would have, but it was about to become the most important tool in my arsenal. I knew Emily was in the pantry organizing cans. She was close enough to hear. I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. This had to be a perfect performance. One slip-up, one note of insincerity, and they would kill me tonight. I dialed the number for the automated weather service, but I held the phone away from my ear just enough so the electronic voice was inaudible, but my voice would carry. I waited for the connection, then cleared my throat. "Hello, Baxter," I said, my voice loud and clear, cutting through the hum of the refrigerator. I paused, listening to the silence from the pantry. The clinking of cans had stopped. She was listening. "Yes, I know it is early," I continued, forcing a weary tone into my voice, "but I didn't sleep well. I have been thinking about what you said last week. About the land." I paused again, letting the word hang there. Land. It was a magic word. "The commercial plot on the south side," I said. "The one near the new stadium." "Yes, that one." I heard a soft gasp from the pantry. It was faint, but I heard it. The south side near the stadium was the hottest real estate market in the city. Every developer wanted a piece of it. "You said the offer was $2 million, correct?" I asked. I waited, counting to 3. $2 million cash. "And the buyer wants to close by the end of the month." I sighed, a long, rattling sound of an old man resigning himself to fate. "Well, Baxter, I think I am going to take it. I am tired. I am sick. You were right. I can't take it with me. And after everything, well, they are still family. Esther needs security. And Trey is struggling. I want to sell it. I want to cash out and divide the money among them before I go. I want to see them happy." I leaned back in my chair, watching the pantry door. It was slightly ajar. "Yes, draw up the papers," I said. "Bring them over on Friday. I will sign everything then. But Baxter, make sure the transfer is set up so they get the funds immediately after the sale. I don't want them waiting for probate. I want to hand them the checks myself." I listened. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. The vacuum cleaner in the living room had stopped. Esther must have been listening too. $2 million. Divided 3 ways. That should set them up for life, right? I paused again, as if listening to advice. "No, Baxter, I am sure. I know they have been difficult, but a father is a father. Maybe this will fix things. Maybe if I give them this, they will remember who I am. Just get the papers ready." Friday. No sooner. I need a few days to get my strength up. I hung up the phone and set it gently on the table. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would vibrate the table. It was a massive gamble. If they checked the property records, if they called my bluff, it was over. But I knew something about Emily. She was arrogant. She believed she knew everything about me. She believed I was a simpleton who had lucked into something years ago and forgotten about it. She wouldn't check. Her greed wouldn't let her. She would only see the dollar signs. I sat there staring at my hands, waiting. It didn't take long. Emily emerged from the pantry. Her transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The cold, hateful woman who had thrown my bank book at me the night before was gone. In her place was a solicitous, wide-eyed angel of mercy. Her movements were fluid and eager. She walked toward the table, her eyes locked on me with a predatory intensity that she tried to mask as concern. "Dad," she said, her voice breathless. "I didn't know you were up. I was just organizing the kitchen." She came around the table and saw the mug of tea sitting in front of me. It was the fresh cup she had made this morning, the one I hadn't touched yet. the one loaded with the morning dose of thallium. I reached for it, my hand trembling intentionally. "I am just having my tea, Emily," I said, lifting the mug. "My throat is dry." Her eyes widened in panic. "If I drank that and got sick today, I wouldn't be able to sign papers on Friday. If I died before Friday, the land would go into probate, and it could take years to untangle, or worse, they might find out it didn't exist. She needed me alive. She needed me lucid. She needed me healthy enough to hold a pen." "No, Dad, wait," she cried out, lunging forward. She snatched the mug from my hand so fast tea sloshed onto the table. "Don't drink that," she said, her voice high and tight. "It is cold. It has been sitting there for an hour. It is stale." She poured the tea into the sink, washing it down with a blast of water as if it were toxic waste, which in a way it was. "Let me make you a fresh cup," she said, turning back to me with a beaming smile. "Or, better yet, how about some real breakfast? Eggs, toast, fruit. You need to keep your strength up, Dad. You said so yourself. You need to be strong for everything." I looked at her. I saw the gears turning in her head. $2 million, the Caribbean timeshare, the debts, the luxury cars. It was all flashing before her eyes. "That would be nice, Emily," I said, leaning back. "I am feeling a little hungry." I watched her bustle around the kitchen, cracking eggs, slicing fruit, treating me like a king. Esther came in from the living room, her eyes wide and greedy, having clearly overheard the conversation. She sat down next to me and patted my hand. "Walter, honey, can I get you a pillow for your back?" she asked. I looked at them both, my wife and my daughter-in-law. 10 minutes ago I was trash to be discarded. Now I was the golden goose. They were saving my life. Not because they loved me, but because they wanted to be the ones to harvest me. I smiled a weak, senile smile. "Yes, Esther," I said. "A pillow would be lovely." I had bought myself time. I had bought myself 3 days. Now I just had to make sure that when Friday came, the only thing they received was a one-way ticket to a jail cell. By Friday evening, my house had been transformed into a carnival of greed. Esther had spent the last of our emergency cash on catering hiring servers and buying a sequined gold dress that made her look like a disco ball. She had invited every cousin, aunt, and distant relative she could find, people who hadn't spoken to us in a decade, but who had suddenly developed a deep familial affection for me once the rumor of $2 million started circulating. The living room was packed with bodies, the air thick with the smell of expensive perfume and roasted pork. Laughter rang out, but it wasn't the warm laughter of a family reunion. It was the sharp, manic laughter of people who smell money. I stood at the top of the stairs looking down at the spectacle. Esther had laid out my clothes on the bed earlier. It wasn't my Sunday best. It wasn't even a decent suit. It was a moth-eaten gray jacket I had bought at a thrift store 20 years ago, and a pair of trousers that were 2 inches too short. "Wear this," she had ordered, her eyes gleaming with malice. "We don't want people thinking you are wasting the money before we even get it. You need to look humble, Walter. You need to look like you need help managing your affairs. It makes the transition easier." She wanted me to look pathetic. She wanted the guests to see a senile, disheveled old man standing next to his vibrant, capable wife and son. It was all part of the narrative. "Poor Walter, he is losing it. Thank God Esther is there to take charge." I put on the suit. The fabric scratched my skin. The sleeves ended at my wrists, exposing my watch. I looked in the mirror. I saw a clown. But beneath the clown suit, I was a soldier preparing for ambush. I walked down the stairs. The conversation died down as I descended. Heads turned. Eyes assessed me. I saw pity. I saw amusement. But mostly I saw hunger. "There he is," Esther shouted, raising a glass of champagne. "The man of the hour. Come here, Walter. Come say hello to Cousin Jerry. You remember Jerry, don't you?" She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my flesh, and dragged me into the center of the room. She was beaming, radiating triumph. She paraded me around like a prize poodle that had seen better days. "He is a little confused lately," she whispered loudly to a group of nodding aunts. "But we are taking care of him. We are going to make sure he is comfortable. We are going to handle everything so he doesn't have to worry his poor, tired head." I played my part. I smiled vacantly. I shook hands with limp fingers. I let them pat my back and talk to me in slow, loud voices. "So Walter, Cousin Jerry," boomed, slapping my shoulder. "I hear you are making some big moves. Selling the South lot, huh? Smart. Very smart. Keeping it in the family, right? I just nodded my head, bobbing like a doll. Yes, Jerry, I mumbled. Family is everything. Esther squeezed my arm. Isn't he sweet? She cooed. He just wants to do the right thing before he can't anymore. The implication was clear. Before he dies. Before he is locked away. I looked at Trey. He was in the corner wearing a new suit he must have bought on credit, holding court with his friends. He looked confident. He looked rich. He was already spending the money in his head. Then there was Emily. She was weaving through the crowd, playing the perfect hostess, filling glasses, directing the servers. She wore a red dress that was cut too low, and she moved with the predatory grace of a shark in a tank of guppies. She caught my eye and winked. It was a conspiratorial wink, a reminder of our deal. I give them the money, they let me live. But the deal was about to expire. Dinner was announced. We moved to the dining room where a buffet had been set up that could feed an army. I sat at the head of the table. Esther sat to my right, Trey to my left. Emily stood behind my chair, her hands resting on my shoulders. Her touch was heavy, possessive. Before we eat, Emily announced, her voice cutting through the clatter of silverware. We need a toast, to Dad, to Walter, for his generosity and his wisdom. A cheer went up around the room. Hear, hear to Walter. Emily reached over and placed a heavy crystal tumbler in front of me. It was filled to the brim with amber liquid. Drink up, Dad, she whispered in my ear, her breath hot and smelling of wine. It is the good stuff. 20-year-old Scotch, just for you. I looked at the glass. I looked at the dark liquid swirling inside. I don't drink anymore, Emily, I said, my voice quiet. It messes with my medication. The room went silent. The smiles faltered. Oh, come on. Walter, Esther said, her voice taking on that dangerous edge. One drink won't kill you. It is a celebration. Don't be a party pooper. Just a sip, Dad Trey urged. To seal the deal. Emily leaned closer, her fingers digging into my trapezius muscles. Drink it, Walter, she hissed, so only I could hear. We need you relaxed. We need you happy. If you don't drink it, I will pour it down your throat myself. They wanted me drunk. They wanted my mind clouded, my defenses lowered. They had the papers ready in the study, I knew it. As soon as the guests left, they would put a pen in my hand and guide it across the dotted line. If I was drunk, it would be easier. If I was drunk, I wouldn't read the fine print. I picked up the glass. My hand trembled just enough to sell the performance. All right, I said. For the family. I raised the glass to my lips. The smell of the alcohol was overpowering. I took a large swallow. The burn was immediate, tearing down my throat. It was strong, very strong. Good man, Jerry shouted. I took another swallow, then another, draining half the glass. The room cheered again. Esther clapped her hands, delight written all over her face. That is the spirit. Now let's eat. I set the glass down. The alcohol hit my empty stomach like a fist. I felt a flush of heat rise to my cheeks. My head spun slightly. It was working. They were winning, or so they thought. I waited until the main course was cleared. I waited until everyone was full and lazy and slightly drunk themselves. I waited until Emily brought out the dessert, a massive cake with the words "Family First" written in icing. I stood up. I swayed slightly, gripping the edge of the table for support. The room quieted down. They looked at me expectantly. This was it. The moment they had been waiting for. The announcement. I want to say something, I said, my voice slurring just a fraction. Esther beamed. Quiet, everyone. Walter wants to make a speech. I looked around the table. I looked at the greedy faces of my relatives. I looked at the triumphant smirk on Emily's face. I looked at the blank entitlement in Trey's eyes. I have been thinking a lot lately, I began. About legacy. About what we leave behind. Trey nodded encouragingly. Go on, Dad. I sold the land, I said. A collective gasp of excitement went around the room. Esther gripped her napkin. $2 million, I continued. That is a lot of money. A life-changing amount of money. Yes, it is. Walter, Esther breathed. I looked down at my hands, my rough, calloused worker hands, and I realized something I said. Money can be a curse. It can make people lazy. It can make them cruel. It can make them forget who they are. Emily's smile wavered slightly. Her eyes narrowed. I looked directly at Trey. I want my son to be a man, I said. A real man. Someone who builds his own way, not someone who waits for a handout. Trey's smile vanished. "And Esther," I said, turning to her, "I want you to be happy. Truly happy. Not just happy because you bought a new hat." Esther's face froze. So I continued, my voice gaining strength, shedding the slur, shedding the weakness. "I have made a decision that I think will help all of you grow, help all of you become better people." I reached into my jacket pocket. I didn't pull out a check. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a pamphlet. "I have decided to donate the entire proceeds of the sale I announced, every single cent." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was a physical weight pressing down on us. You could hear a pin drop. You could hear the ice melting in the glasses. "Donate." Esther whispered the word, escaping her lips like a dying breath. "Yes," I said, smiling a genuine smile for the first time in months. "To the Inner City Youth Scholarship Fund. To help poor kids go to college, kids who actually want to work, kids who appreciate an opportunity." I dropped the pamphlet on the table. It landed in the frosting of the cake right on top of the word family. "I have already signed the paperwork," I lied. "The transfer happens on Monday. Isn't it wonderful? Think of all the lives we are going to change." I looked at Emily. Her face had gone completely white. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. The blood had drained from her face, leaving her looking like a wax statue. Trey was staring at me, his eyes bulging. You gave it away," he stammered. "All of it. Every penny," I said cheerfully. Esther made a sound deep in her throat, a guttural, animalistic growl. She stood up so fast her chair tipped over backward and crashed to the floor. "You fool!" she screamed. "You senile old fool! What have you done?" She grabbed the tablecloth and yanked it. Dishes, glasses, and the massive cake went flying. Food splattered across the guests. Wine soaked the expensive rug. "You are lying," Emily shrieked, finding her voice. "You can't do that. You promised. You said you were going to divide it." "I changed my mind," I said calmly, standing amidst the chaos. "It is my money. It is my land. I can do whatever I want with it." The guests were scrambling out of their chairs, backing away from the table. They looked from me to Esther to the ruined dinner. They saw the madness in Esther's eyes. They saw the murderous rage in Emily's face. "I think we should go," Cousin Jerry muttered, grabbing his wife's arm. "Get out!" Esther screamed at them, picking up a plate and throwing it at the wall. "Get out, all of you. Get out of my house." The guests fled. They ran for the door, leaving their coats, leaving their dignity. Within minutes, the house was empty save for the four of us. I stood there feeling the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The Prussian blue was working. The alcohol was buzzing. But the satisfaction was the strongest drug of all. They looked at me. The three people who were supposed to love me. They looked at me with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. "You ruined everything," Trey whispered. "No, son," I said. "I just saved you from yourself. Now, if you will excuse me, I am going to bed. I am very tired." I turned and walked toward the stairs. I didn't look back. I knew they wouldn't attack me now. Not yet. They were too shocked, too broken. But I also knew that the night wasn't over. I had pushed them over the edge. I had taken away their hope. And when hope is gone, only violence remains. I walked into my bedroom and locked the door. I pushed the heavy oak dresser in front of it. I sat on the bed and waited. I knew they were coming. The party was over. The real war had just begun. The last car door slammed shut outside, echoing like a gunshot in the driveway. The sound marked the end of the party and the beginning of the hunt. The silence that filled the house was heavy and suffocating. The air smelled of stale perfume, spilled wine, and the metallic tang of adrenaline. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, my hand gripping the banister, not out of weakness, but to steady myself against the wave of hatred rolling off the three people standing in the foyer. The masks were gone. There were no more fake smiles, no more solicitous offers of tea, no more pretense of family. There were only three predators who had just watched their meal walk out the door. Esther was the first to move. She didn't walk, she lunged. Her gold-sequined dress shimmered violently as she crossed the distance between us. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure fury, her eyes bulging. I had lived with this woman for 40 years. I had shared a bed with her. I had raised a child with her. But in that moment, I did not know her. She was a stranger possessed by a demon of greed. "You stupid old bastard," she screamed, her voice cracking. She swung her hand. I saw it coming, but I didn't move. I didn't block it. I wanted to feel it. I wanted the physical confirmation that our marriage was dead. Her palm connected with my cheek with a force that snapped my head to the side. It wasn't a slap of passion. It was a slap of contempt. It was the way you hit a dog that has chewed up a slipper. My skin burned, but the pain was distant dull compared to the ache in my chest. "How dare you?" she hissed, spitting flying from her mouth. "How dare you give away my money? That was mine. I earned that money putting up with you for 40 years. I earned it by washing your dirty clothes and cooking your meals and listening to your boring stories. You had no right." I slowly turned my head back to look at her. I tasted blood inside my cheek. "It was never your money, Esther," I said, my voice low and steady. "It was Sam's money. It was my hard work. And you didn't earn a dime. You spent it. You spent every penny I brought into this house on clothes and jewelry and trying to impress people who don't care if you live or die." She raised her hand again, but Emily caught her wrist. Emily wasn't screaming. She was vibrating with a cold, controlled rage that was far more terrifying than Esther's hysterics. She stepped in front of Esther, pushing her mother-in-law aside like a piece of furniture. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw the killer Sam had warned me about. Her eyes were dead. Flat, reptilian. "The donation," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "It is a lie, isn't it? Lie. You haven't signed anything yet. The banks are closed. You just said that to humiliate us." I looked at her. She was smart. Smarter than the others. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I faxed the paperwork this morning. Maybe the money is already gone, Emily. Maybe you killed Sam for nothing." Her face twitched, a small violent spasm beneath her left eye. "You know," she whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The knowledge hung between us, suspended in the electric tension. "Get the papers," she ordered, not looking at me, but over my shoulder at Trey. Trey was standing by the front door, still wearing his new suit. He looked sick. He looked terrified. But when his wife spoke, he snapped to attention like a trained dog. "What papers?" he asked, his voice trembling. "The power of attorney," Emily snapped. "And the deed transfer. Get them, now." She turned back to me. "You are going to sign them, Walter. Tonight. You are going to sign over the house. You are going to sign over the land proceeds. And you are going to sign a letter retracting that donation." "And if I don't?" I asked, bracing myself. She smiled. It was the ugliest thing I had ever seen. "Then you won't wake up tomorrow. We are done waiting for nature to take its course. We are done with tea." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small black pistol. It was a cheap piece, probably bought on the street, but it was lethal enough. "Go upstairs," she commanded, gesturing with the gun. "Into the bedroom. Move." I looked at the gun. I looked at Trey, who was staring at his shoes. I looked at Esther, who was watching with a look of vindictive triumph. I turned and walked up the stairs. My legs felt heavy. The Prussian blue was fighting the poison, but the stress was taking its toll. I walked into my bedroom. It was the room where I had slept for decades, but now it felt like a cell. Emily followed me to the threshold. "Trey," she yelled down the stairs. "Get the toolbox!" I backed into the room. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer. She just kept the gun trained on my chest. Trey appeared a moment later carrying a red metal toolbox. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for forgiveness he didn't deserve. "Take the door off," Emily ordered. "What?" Trey asked, confused. "Take the door off the hinges," she screamed. "He is going to lock himself in. I know him. Take the door down. We are not playing games." Trey knelt down. He pulled out a screwdriver and a hammer. I watched my son, my own flesh and blood, kneel on the floor and begin to dismantle the only barrier between me and a bullet. He positioned the screwdriver against the bottom hinge pin. He tapped it with the hammer. Clink, clink, clink. The sound was maddening. It was the sound of my home being violated. It was the sound of my safety being stripped away, screw by screw. "Trey," I said, my voice rough, "don't do this. Once you do this, there is no going back. You are crossing a line, son." He didn't look up. He just hit the pin harder. Bang! Bang! The pin popped up an inch. He pulled it out with his fingers and dropped it on the floor. It rolled across the hardwood, stopping at my feet. "I am sorry, Dad," he whispered, "but we need the money." He moved to the middle hinge. I realized then that words were useless. They were beyond reason. They were operating on a primal level of need and fear. I had to act. I grabbed the edge of the heavy oak door and slammed it shut. It hit Trey's shoulder. He yelped and fell back, dropping the screwdriver. "Hey!" Emily shouted, raising the gun. I ignored her. I threw the deadbolt. I knew it wouldn't hold, not without the hinges. The door was just a slab of wood leaning against the frame, now held in place only on one side. If they removed the pins, the door would fall inward, or they could just pull it out. I grabbed the heavy oak dresser that stood next to the door. It was massive, filled with 40 years of clothes and junk. I put my shoulder against it and pushed. My feet slipped on the rug. I gritted my teeth, summoning every ounce of strength I had left. I pushed. The dresser groaned. It scraped across the floor, leaving deep gouges in the wood. I shoved it until it was wedged firmly against the door, covering the entire frame. "Open this door!" Walter Emily screamed from the hallway. She kicked the door. The wood shuddered, but the dresser held firm. I backed away, breathing hard. My chest hurt. My heart was fluttering. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to calm down. I was trapped. I was unarmed, and there was a woman with a gun and a man with a screwdriver on the other side of the wall. I heard them arguing in the hallway. He blocked it. Trey whined. "I can't get the other pins out. The door is putting too much pressure on them." "Figure it out," Emily snapped. "Break it down. Use a crowbar. I don't care. Just get in there." "We don't have a crowbar," Esther said. "It is in the garage." "Go get it," Emily ordered. I heard heavy footsteps running down the stairs. That would buy me a few minutes, maybe 10. I looked around the room. I needed a weapon. I needed an escape route. The window was too high. A drop to the concrete patio would break my legs. The phone line had been cut days ago. My cell phone was in my pocket, but I knew calling 911 might take too long. Then I heard it. A voice. It wasn't shouting. It was a frantic whisper coming through the thin plaster of the wall near the door. The hallway was quiet now, except for Emily. "Please listen to me," she was saying, her voice trembling with a fear I had never heard before. I crept closer to the barricaded door, pressing my ear against the wood. "No, no, please don't do that. I will have it, I swear. Tomorrow, yes, tomorrow. The old man is signing the papers tonight." She was on the phone. I held my breath. "No, listen to me, Vinny. You can't send anyone here. Not tonight. There are complications. But I have him cornered. He is selling the land. $2 million. I will have your $100,000 plus the interest by noon. Just give me 12 hours. Silence. She was listening to the person on the other end. "Please," she whimpered. "I don't want to die. I did everything you said. I got the poison. I used it. He is tough, but he is breaking. I promise. Just don't hurt me." She hung up. I heard her slide down the wall and hit the floor with a soft thud. I heard her sobbing. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with a terrifying clarity. Emily wasn't just greedy. She wasn't just trying to upgrade her lifestyle. She was owned. She was in debt to loan sharks. Serious ones. The kind who didn't send letters, they sent hitmen. The $100,000 she mentioned wasn't for a house. It was blood money. And the poison. She said, "I did everything you said. I got the poison." This wasn't just her idea. She had been instructed. The loan sharks had given her the method. They had turned my daughter-in-law into an assassin to recoup a gambling debt. My anger shifted. It didn't disappear, but it cooled into something sharper. She was a monster, yes, but she was a monster with a gun to her head. That made her desperate. That made her reckless. But it also gave me an opening. If she didn't get the money by noon tomorrow, she was a dead woman. That meant she couldn't kill me. Not yet. She needed my signature. If I died without signing the transfer, she got nothing. The land would go into probate, and Vinny, whoever he was, would come to collect his debt in blood. She needed me alive. She needed me compliant. I heard Trey running back up the stairs. "I got it," he panted. "I got the crowbar. No." Emily said, her voice thick with tears, but suddenly steely again. "Stop." Why, Trey asked. "We need to get in there." "Not like this," she said. "We can't hurt him. Not yet. If he is unconscious, he can't sign. If he is dead, we are screwed." Vinny. Vinny gave me a deadline. She stood up. I heard her pacing. We starve him out, she said. We keep him in there. We cut the power. We cut the water. We make him miserable. By morning he will be begging to sign just to get a glass of water. But the police, Esther's voice quavered. What if the neighbors heard the yelling? Let them hear, Emily said. We will tell them he is having an episode. We will tell them he is violent. We just have to hold out until morning. She leaned against the door. I could hear her breathing on the other side of the wood. Walter, she said loudly, her voice regaining its composure. I know you can hear me. We are going to turn off the main breaker. We are going to shut off the water valve. It is going to get cold and dark in there. You have until sunrise. If that door isn't open by 6 a.m., I am coming in, and I am going to start breaking fingers until you hold a pen. She didn't wait for an answer. I heard their footsteps retreating. A moment later, the lights in my room flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. I stood there in the gloom. They thought they had trapped a helpless animal. They thought cutting the lights would scare me. They forgot that I was an engineer. I knew how this house was wired because I wired it myself. I knew where the pipes ran, and they forgot one crucial thing. I had the USB drive, and on that drive was Sam's voice. And now I had Emily's confession recorded on my mental tape. I felt my way to the closet. I reached up to the top shelf and pulled down a heavy shoebox. Inside, wrapped in an oily cloth, was a Colt 1911 pistol that Sam had given me years ago for protection. I checked the magazine. Full. I didn't want to use it. I didn't want to shoot my family. But if that door opened at 6 a.m., I wouldn't be the one begging. I sat on the floor with my back against the dresser, the gun in my lap. I took a sip of water from the bottle on my nightstand, rationing it. I had 6 hours. 6 hours to come up with a plan that didn't end in a bloodbath, or maybe a plan that ended in the right kind of bloodbath. I looked at the darkness. Let them come, I whispered. Let them come. I waited until the first gray light of dawn touched the windowsill. My watch read 5:30 in the morning. The house was silent, a heavy tomb-like stillness that masked the violence waiting on the other side of my bedroom door. They were waiting for 6 o'clock, the deadline Emily had set. They expected me to be broken by the cold and the darkness. They expected an old man begging for mercy. They did not expect me to be tying my bedsheets together with a knot I learned in the army 50 years ago. I tested the makeshift rope against the heavy leg of the bed frame. It held. I opened the window. The air was crisp and smelled of dew and pine, a stark contrast to the stagnant air of my prison. I threw the sheets out. They dangled about 5 feet above the rose bushes. It was a drop I could manage. My joints ached, and the thallium in my blood made my hands feel like they belonged to someone else, but fear is a powerful fuel. I climbed out. The descent was clumsy. I scraped my knuckles against the brick siding. My shoulders screamed in protest as I took my full weight. I dropped the last few feet, landing in the soft earth of the garden. I froze, listening. Nothing. No shouting. No footsteps. They were probably sleeping in shifts, guarding the hallway door, confident that their trap was inescapable. I crept to the back of the property where I had parked my truck the night before, anticipating a need for a quick exit. I didn't start the engine immediately. I put it in neutral and let it roll down the driveway, utilizing the slight incline of the street. Only when I was 2 blocks away did I turn the key. The engine roared to life, a beautiful sound of freedom. I didn't look back. I drove straight to the warehouse district where Baxter had his office. Baxter was waiting for me. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His tie was loose and his eyes were red-rimmed. When he saw me, he let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. "Walter," he said, ushering me inside and locking the heavy steel door behind us. "I was afraid you were dead. I tried calling your house, but the line was dead." "They cut it," I said, moving past him to his desk. "They cut the power, too. They are done playing nice, Baxter. We need to see the rest of that drive. Now." Baxter nodded, his hands trembling as he plugged the red USB drive into his secure computer. He typed in a password, his fingers flying across the keys. "There is a second folder," he said. Sam encrypted it heavily. It took my tech guy 3 days to crack it. He said he didn't want to know what was in it. He clicked the folder. A series of files appeared. Documents, spreadsheets, and one more video file. I sat down. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from the exertion of my escape, but from a dread I couldn't name. I clicked play. Sam appeared on the screen again. He looked even worse in this video, barely able to hold his head up, but his eyes burned with a feverish intensity. "Walter," he rasped, "if you are watching this part, it means you know about the poison. But you don't know the whole story. You think Emily is just a greedy daughter-in-law who wants a quick payout. You think she is just a bad apple." He paused, coughing violently into a handkerchief. When he pulled it away, it was spotted with blood. "She isn't just a bad apple, Walter. She is the orchard." The screen shifted. It wasn't Sam anymore. It was a screen recording of a chat room. The background was dark, the text green. The name of the chat room was the Garden Club. I leaned closer, squinting at the text. User Orchid writes, "My husband is taking too long. The tea isn't working fast enough. He is complaining of stomach pains, but he is still going to work." User Foxglove replies, "Increase the dosage by 2 milligrams. But be careful. If he vomits too much, he might go to the doctor. Mix it with ginger to settle the stomach, and remember the payment is due on the 1st. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. Foxglove. Sam's voice came back over the video as the chat log scrolled. "Foxglove is Emily," Sam said. "My private investigator tracked the IP address. It comes from your house, Walter, from the guest Wi-Fi." I watched in horror as the conversation continued. Orchid was asking about disposal methods. Foxglove was giving advice on cremation versus burial, recommending cremation to destroy tissue samples. Then a new document appeared on the screen. It was a spreadsheet. It had names, dates, and amounts. Sam Rivers, $50,000, paid. Arthur Miller, $75,000, pending. Robert Vance, $100,000 paid. My name wasn't on the list yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time. "This isn't just a murder," Walter Sam whispered. "It is a business. Emily isn't just killing me. She is supplying the method, the substance, and the instructions to a network of women all over the state. She is a consultant for patricide. She is the supplier." The video cut to a grainy photo taken from a distance. It showed Emily in a park handing a small brown paper bag to a woman in a large hat. The woman in the hat was Sam's wife. "My wife didn't know how to poison me," Sam said, his voice breaking. "She wouldn't know thallium from table salt. Emily sought her out. Emily found her at the country club, heard her complaining about money, and offered her a solution. A permanent solution. For a fee." I sat back in the chair, my mind reeling. The scope of it was staggering. Emily wasn't just a desperate woman in debt to loan sharks. That was part of it, yes. The gambling debts were real. But this was how she planned to pay them off. She had turned murder into a franchise. "She is a serial killer," Baxter whispered from behind me. His face was gray. "She is a professional serial killer." "She is a broker," I corrected him, my voice hollow. "She doesn't pull the trigger. She sells the bullets." I looked at the spreadsheet again. There were 6 names on it. 6 men. 3 were marked paid. That meant 3 men were dead. Sam was one of them. The other 3 were walking corpses just like me. And Emily, my daughter-in-law, the woman who sat at my table and pretended to care about my health. She was the architect of it all. The video continued. Sam was crying now. She threatened my wife, Walter. After I got sick, my wife got cold feet. She wanted to stop. She wanted to take me to a specialist. But Emily told her that if I survived, she would send the chat logs to the police. She blackmailed her into finishing the job. I thought about the conversation I had heard through the wall. Emily pleading with Vinny. "I did everything you said. I got the poison." Vinny wasn't just a loan shark. He was her supplier. He was the source of the thallium. Emily was the distributor. And she was squeezed between a dangerous criminal organization and her own victims. The video ended with Sam looking straight into the camera. "She is dangerous, Walter. More dangerous than you can imagine. She has no conscience. She has no empathy. She looks at us and she sees livestock. She sees a harvest. Do not let her win. Do not let her kill again." The screen went black. I sat in the silence of the office, the hum of the computer fan the only sound. I felt a profound shift inside me. The fear was gone. The shock was gone. What remained was a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't dealing with a family dispute. I wasn't dealing with a greedy relative. I was dealing with a monster that had infested my home, eaten my friend, and was now trying to consume me. I stood up. My knees didn't shake. My hands were steady. "Baxter," I said, "copy these files, send them to a secure cloud server, then print everything out, every chat log, every photo, every spreadsheet. What are you going to do?" Baxter asked, his eyes wide with terror. "Are you going to the police?" "Not yet," I said. "Why not?" Baxter demanded. "This is enough to put her away for life. This is a RICO case, Walter. This is huge." "Because she has hostages," I said. "She has Esther, she has Trey, and right now she thinks she has me trapped in a bedroom. If the police roll up with sirens blaring, she might do something drastic. She might have a weapon. She might try to take them out with her, or she might destroy evidence I don't know about yet." I looked at the blank screen where Sam's face had been. "Besides," I said, my voice dropping to a growl, "she owes me. She owes me for Sam. She owes me for my hair. She owes me for my peace. And I am going to collect." I turned to Baxter. "I need you to draw up a new document. A real one this time." "What kind of document?" Baxter asked, grabbing a notepad. "A confession," I said. "I am going to make her sign it. I am going to make her admit to everything. And then I am going to hand her over to the police myself. But first I had to go back. I had to go back into the lion's den." "You are going back there," Baxter exclaimed. "You are crazy, Walter. She will kill you." "No, she won't," I said, checking my watch. "It is 7:30. She thinks I am still locked in my room. She thinks she is starving me out. She doesn't know I am loose. She doesn't know I know about the network." I walked to the door. "She thinks she is the predator," I said, opening the lock. "She thinks she is the fox in the hen house." I looked back at Baxter. She forgot that the farmer has a shotgun. I drove back toward my house, the morning sun shining bright and deceptive on the suburban streets. I wasn't just Walter Jefferson anymore. I wasn't just a retired engineer. I was the avenging angel for Sam Rivers. I was the last line of defense for every old man on that list who didn't know his tea was poisoned. Emily wanted a war. She wanted to play God with our lives. She was about to find out that she had picked a fight with the wrong old man. I wasn't just fighting for my life. I was fighting to burn her entire network to the ground. I drove my truck back to the house with the morning sun burning my eyes. I parked 2 blocks away behind a line of hedges. I didn't want them to hear the engine. I checked the Colt 1911 tucked into my waistband at the small of my back. It was heavy and cold, a comforting weight against my spine. I had the confession document Baxter had drafted folded in my inside pocket. I walked to the house, moving through the neighbor's yard, keeping to the shadows. It was 8:15 in the morning. I expected the front door to still be blocked by the dresser upstairs. I expected to hear shouting. Instead, the front door was unlocked. The silence that drifted out was more terrifying than any scream. I pushed the door open and stepped into the foyer. They were waiting for me. Esther sat in her favorite armchair, clutching a handkerchief. Trey stood by the fireplace, looking like he was about to vomit. Emily stood in the center of the room, her arms crossed her face, a mask of stone. But it was the fourth person who made my hackles rise. A man stood next to Emily. He was wearing a white lab coat, but it looked like a costume. It was too big in the shoulders and stained at the cuffs. He was thick-set, with a neck that spilled over his collar and hands that looked like they had been breaking rocks, not healing patients. He held a black medical bag in one hand. "Welcome home, Walter," Emily said. Her voice was too calm, too controlled. I stopped my hand, drifting toward my back. "Who is this?" "This is Dryles," she said. "He is a specialist. We called him because we are very worried about your episode last night. Locking yourself in a room, threatening your family. It is a psychotic break, Walter." I looked at the man. He didn't have the eyes of a doctor. He had the eyes of a thug. This was the man she had paid. This was the man who was going to sign my life away. "I am fine," I said, backing up toward the door. "Get out of my house." The man moved fast, faster than a man his size should move. He didn't speak. He just lunged. I reached for the gun, but my reflexes were slowed by the poison in my blood. Before I could draw, he was on me. He slammed me against the wall, the impact knocking the wind out of my lungs. His forearm crushed my throat, pinning me. "Hold him," Emily screamed. "Do it now." Trey ran forward, grabbing my legs. Esther turned her head away, unable to watch, but unable to stop it. The man in the white coat reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a stethoscope. He pulled out a syringe. It was already loaded with a clear liquid. "No," I choked out, struggling against his weight. He didn't hesitate. He jammed the needle into the side of my neck. I felt the cold burn of the liquid entering my muscle. "That will settle him down," the man grunted. His voice was gravel and smoke. He stepped back, letting me slide down the wall. I tried to stand, but my legs felt like rubber. The room tilted violently to the left. The colors of the rug and the walls started to bleed together. It wasn't just a sedative, it was a paralytic. A chemical straitjacket. My vision blurred. I saw Emily standing over me. She looked like a giant. "Get him to the table," she ordered, "before he goes completely under." The man and Trey grabbed me under the arms. They dragged me across the floor, my boots scraping uselessly against the hardwood. They dumped me into a chair at the dining room table. I slumped forward, my chin hitting my chest. I couldn't lift my head. My tongue felt too big for my mouth. "Is he out?" Trey asked, his voice trembling. "He is awake," the doctor said, checking my pupil with a rough thumb. "He can hear us. He just can't do anything about it." Perfect state for compliance. Emily slammed a document onto the table in front of me. The sound echoed in my skull like a gong. "This is it, Walter," she said, leaning close to my ear. "This is the voluntary guardianship agreement. And the transfer of assets." She forced a pen into my right hand. My fingers were limp. I couldn't grip it. "Help him," she snapped at the doctor. The thick-set man grabbed my hand. He squeezed my fingers around the pen until I thought the bones would snap. He moved his hand over mine, guiding it toward the paper. "Sign it," he growled. I tried to pull back. I tried to drop the pen, but my muscles wouldn't obey. The connection between my brain and my body had been severed. I could feel the pen touching the paper. I could see the ink starting to form the first letter of my name, W. If I signed this, it was over. They would pack me off to some hole in the ground and I would die there alone and forgotten. They would win. Sam's death would go unpunished. I looked at the paper through the haze. I saw the words, "total incapacity." I saw the words, "full control." I looked at Emily. She was smiling. It was the smile of a victor watching the enemy bleed out. "Just let go, Walter," she whispered. "It is easier this way." Rage is a powerful antidote. It can't neutralize a sedative, but it can override the nervous system for a split second. It can summon adrenaline from reserves you didn't know you had. I focused everything I had on my right hand. I didn't try to pull away. I didn't try to drop the pen. I waited. The doctor was relaxed now, confident in his strength. He was guiding my hand, casually distracted by Emily's smile. I tightened my grip. It took every ounce of will I possessed. I locked my fingers around the barrel of the pen, turning it from a writing instrument into a shiv. I didn't aim for the paper. With a guttural roar that tore my throat, I drove the pen backward and up. I slammed the metal tip into the back of the doctor's hand right between the tendons. He screamed, a high-pitched sound of shock and pain. He let go of my hand, instinctively clutching his injury. I didn't stop. The adrenaline surged, clearing the fog for a heartbeat. I pushed off the table. The chair tipped over backward, and I went with it, hitting the floor hard. The impact jarred my teeth, but it woke my legs up. He stabbed me, the doctor yelled, blood dripping onto the contract. "The crazy old man stabbed me." "Grab him!" Emily shrieked. "Don't let him get away!" I rolled onto my stomach. I couldn't stand. My legs were still too weak to support me. I clawed at the rug, dragging myself forward. I was a soldier again, crawling through the mud under fire. I headed for the kitchen pantry. Not the pantry Emily used. The storage closet under the back stairs. The one I had reinforced 2 years ago when I started keeping large amounts of cash in the house. Trey lunged for my ankle. His hand brushed my boot. I kicked back blindly. My heel connected with something soft, probably his face. I heard him yelp. I crawled. My fingernails broke against the floorboards. My breath came in ragged gasps. The hallway seemed miles long. "Get him!" Emily screamed. "He is going for the closet!" I reached the door. It was a heavy steel fire door I had installed myself, painted white to look like wood. I reached up and grabbed the handle. I pulled myself up, using the doorknob as a crutch. The doctor was charging at me, holding his bleeding hand, his face twisted in fury. I threw myself inside the small room and slammed the door shut. I heard the heavy thud of his body hitting the steel a second later. I threw the deadbolt. Then I slid the secondary floor latch into place. I collapsed on the cool linoleum floor, my back against the door. I was safe, for the moment. The room was small, only about 6 feet by 6 feet. It was lined with shelves of canned food and supplies, but it was also my command center. "Open this door, Walter!" the doctor roared, pounding on the steel. "I'm going to break your neck." I ignored him. I dragged myself to the corner where I kept a backup generator and a dedicated laptop. This room had its own ventilation system, its own power supply. I had built it for hurricanes. I had built it for riots. I never thought I would use it to hide from my daughter-in-law. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the bottle of Prussian blue. I took 2 pills dry, swallowing them. My throat felt like sandpaper. The pounding on the door continued, rhythmic and heavy. They were trying to break it down. Good luck, I thought. That door is solid core steel reinforced with a custom frame. You would need a battering ram. I pulled myself up to the small desk in the corner. I opened the laptop. It wasn't connected to the house Wi-Fi. It had a satellite uplink, a relic from my paranoia about grid failure. I turned it on. The screen glowed blue in the dark room, lighting up my face. I heard Emily's voice through the door, muffled but distinct. "Cut the power," she ordered. "Cut the water. We will smoke him out." I smiled. Let them cut the power. Let them cut the water. I had 50 gallons stored in here, but I wasn't just going to hide. I wasn't going to wait for them to figure out how to get in. I typed in a password. A program opened on the screen. It showed a grid of 6 camera feeds. I had installed hidden cameras inside the house 3 days ago, right after I found the doctor's note. They were tiny, hidden in smoke detectors and light fixtures. I watched the screen. I saw the living room. Esther was pacing, wringing her hands. Trey was holding his nose, which was bleeding. The doctor was wrapping his hand in a towel, his face red with rage. And Emily was standing in the hallway holding a fire axe she must have retrieved from the garage. She swung the axe at the door. Clang. The sound rang through the steel, vibrating against my back. She swung again and again. She wasn't going to stop. She was going to hack her way in. I looked at the laptop. I opened a browser window. I logged into my neighborhood's community Facebook page. It had 4,000 members. I clicked the button that said, "Go Live." I titled the stream, "Murder in Progress." I pointed the laptop camera at myself. I looked terrible. My eyes were bloodshot, my skin gray, I was sweating profusely. I looked like a dying man. But I was a dying man with an audience. The little red light came on. "Hello, neighbors," I rasped into the microphone. "My name is Walter Jefferson. You might know me as the old man who drives the blue truck." I held up the bottle of pills. "Right now, my family is trying to break down this door with an axe because I refuse to let them kill me." I switched the feed. I put the live camera view of the hallway onto the stream. Thousands of people suddenly saw Emily swinging an axe at my door, her face twisted in a rictus of hate. They saw the doctor, a stranger, nursing a stab wound. They saw Trey wiping blood from his nose. I leaned back against the wall, watching the viewer count tick up. 10, 50, 100. They wanted to declare me incompetent. They wanted to silence me. Well, I thought watching Emily raise the axe again. Let's see how they explain this to the world. I turned the volume up on the microphone. "Say cheese, Emily," I whispered. "You are on TV." I slammed the heavy steel deadbolts into place just as the first blow landed against the wood. The impact sounded like a car crash reverberating through the small space. The door frame shuddered violently, but the steel core I had installed years ago held firm. I slid down to the cold linoleum floor, my back pressed against the metal, trying to catch my breath. My lungs burned with every inhalation and my legs were trembling uncontrollably, not from fear, but from the paralytic agent still fighting a war against my adrenaline. I heard Emily scream on the other side of the door. She sounded like a banshee, her voice cracking with hysteria. "You are dead, old man," she shrieked. "You are dead!" She swung the axe again. Clang! The sound was deafening in the small enclosed space, vibrating through my spine and into my teeth. I looked at the door. I had reinforced it myself 3 years ago after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood, solid steel core custom frame heavy-duty deadbolts. I had built it to keep thieves out. I never imagined I had built it to keep my family out. "Open this door, Walter. This is the doctor." His voice was ragged wet with pain and fury. "You stabbed me, you crazy old bat. I am going to bleed out. Open this door, or I swear to God I will tear this house down brick by brick." I didn't answer. I dragged myself further into the room, away from the door. The space was tight, only about 6 feet by 8 feet, lined with metal shelves. It was a prepper's paradise hidden under the stairs. Canned peaches, bottled water, batteries, tools. I had spent years stalking it while Esther mocked me for being paranoid. Now my paranoia was the only thing keeping me alive. Another blow from the axe hit the door. This one was lower near the handle. I saw the wood veneer splinter flying into the room, but the steel underneath gleamed dull and gray. They weren't getting in. Not with an axe. They would need a blowtorch or explosives. "Give me that," Emily shrieked. "You are hitting it wrong." I heard a scuffle, then a rhythmic hacking sound. She was attacking the drywall next to the frame. Smart girl. If she couldn't go through the door, she would go around it. But I had reinforced the studs, too. Steel beams inside the walls. I had been thorough. "It is no use, Emily," I whispered to myself in the dark. "I built this cage, and you are on the outside." Suddenly, the sliver of light coming from under the door vanished. The hum of the ventilation fan died instantly, leaving a ringing silence. The darkness was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating blackness that pressed against my eyes. "Cut the power," Emily yelled from the hallway. "Cut it all. Let him rot in the dark." I heard Trey running to the breaker box in the basement. A moment later, the ambient hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen died too. The house was dead. The silence was thick and heavy, broken only by the ragged breathing of the people outside my door. Then came the sound of rushing water, followed by a sudden metallic clank. They had shut off the main water valve. "He needs water," Emily shouted, her voice muffled by the wall. "The poison makes you thirsty. He will come out when his throat starts to close up. He will come crawling out begging for a drop." I fumbled in the dark, my hands brushing against the cool plastic of a water jug. I had 20 gallons stored in here, enough to last a month. I unscrewed the cap and took a long drink. The water was lukewarm, but it tasted like life. I swallowed 2 more Prussian blue pills dry, swallowing them before washing them down. My throat was raw, my tongue felt swollen, but I was still breathing. I was still thinking. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small tactical flashlight. I clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the small desk in the corner like a spotlight on a stage. My laptop sat there, a black monolith. I crawled over to it. My legs were regaining some feeling, the paralysis fading into a dull ache in my muscles. I opened the laptop. I pressed the power button. The screen flared to life, casting a ghostly blue glow over my face. The battery indicator showed 98%. I had a satellite uplink modem, a small black box that bypassed the house router. I switched it on. The green lights blinked, searching for a signal. Connection established. I wasn't just surviving, I was preparing. I could hear them outside, the scratching of the axe against the wall, the heavy breathing of the doctor. They were like rats scratching at the walls. They thought I was terrified. They thought I was huddled in the fetal position, praying for mercy. They didn't know that I had spent 40 years solving problems that seemed impossible. I had fixed engines that were fused with rust. I had designed cooling systems for desert warfare. Isolation didn't scare me. Darkness didn't scare me. What scared me was how easy it was for them to turn off the lights on my life. How easy it was for them to decide I didn't matter. I took another drink of water. I checked my watch. It was almost 9 in the morning. The world outside was waking up, drinking coffee, going to work. And I was in a box under the stairs fighting a war. I typed in the security code on my laptop. The screen split into a grid of 6 gray squares. The hidden cameras came online. The feed was grainy black and white night vision, but clear enough to see the monsters in my home. Camera 1 showed the hallway. Emily was there leaning against the wall, the axe resting at her feet. She looked exhausted. Her hair was wild, her dress torn. She was staring at the door with a look of pure malevolence. The doctor was sitting on the floor, wrapping his hand in a bloody shirt, his face pale and sweaty. Camera 2 showed the kitchen. It was empty. Camera 3 showed the living room. My breath caught in my throat. Esther was there. My wife. The woman I had bought this house for. The woman who had planted the roses in the garden. She was holding a red plastic gas can, the one I kept in the shed for the lawnmower. She was walking around the living room, splashing liquid onto the curtains. She poured it over the sofa. She poured it onto the expensive rug she loved so much. "No, Esther," I whispered, touching the screen. "Don't do it." Trey walked into the frame. He grabbed her arm. I could see his lips moving. "Mom, what are you doing?" There was no audio, but his body language was clear. He was terrified. He was trying to pull the can away. Esther shook him off with surprising strength. She said something, her face twisted in a snarl. She pointed at the ceiling. She pointed at the door to my hiding place. She wasn't just destroying evidence. She was smoking me out, or burning me out. If they couldn't get in, they were going to turn the house into an oven. They were going to cremate me alive, just like they discussed in the chat logs. They figured if the house burned down, my body would be found in the ashes, and the poison would be untraceable. An old man trapped in a fire. A tragic accident. I watched as Esther pulled a box of matches from her pocket. She looked around the room. She looked at the photos on the mantle. Photos of us. Photos of Trey graduating. Photos of our life together. She didn't hesitate. She didn't cry. She struck a match. The flame flared white in the camera feed, a tiny star of destruction. This was it. They had crossed the final line. There was no coming back from arson. There was no coming back from attempted murder by fire. I looked at the laptop camera. The little green light next to the lens blinked. I wasn't just watching. I was broadcasting. I opened the browser window. I logged into the community page where thousands of people were already waiting for the next update. The stream was still live. The viewer count had dropped when I went dark, but now it was spiking again. I switched the input. I put the feed from camera 3 onto the main screen. Thousands of people, my neighbors, my friends, strangers across the city suddenly saw Esther standing in her living room holding a burning match over a gasoline-soaked rug. I leaned into the microphone. "Look closely," I said, my voice raspy but loud. "Look at my wife. She is about to burn 40 years of marriage to the ground just to kill me." I saw Esther drop the match. The rug ignited instantly. A wall of fire roared up, capturing the curtains. Smoke began to fill the frame. It was time. I couldn't stay in the box anymore. The heat would cook me before the smoke got me. I grabbed the fire extinguisher I kept in the corner. I grabbed the axe I kept for emergencies. I stood up. My legs were steady. My hands were steady. I was going to open the door, and I was going to walk through the fire. The heat inside the steel room was becoming unbearable, rising with every second as the fire outside consumed the oxygen. I sat in front of the laptop watching the viewer count climb higher and higher. 15,000 people, 20,000. I was broadcasting my own execution to a stadium of strangers. The smoke was seeping in faster now, stinging my eyes and coating my throat with a bitter taste that rivaled the poison in my blood. I knew I had to time this perfectly. If I opened the door too soon, Emily would kill me. If I waited too long, the fire would. I typed a message into the chat box, my fingers stiff and clumsy. "Police are 5 minutes away. She is breaking through now." I switched the main feed to the hallway camera. The image was grainy through the smoke, but the violence was clear. Emily was no longer chopping. She was battering. She was using the back of the axe head, slamming it against the weakened drywall around the frame. She was screaming with every swing, a primal sound of frustration and rage that cut through the roar of the fire. She wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. She didn't care about the neighbors. She only cared about ending me before I could ruin her. I turned the volume up on the laptop speakers. I wanted the sound of her fury to be recorded. I wanted the jury to hear the intent in her breathing. "I know you are in there, Walter," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You think you are so smart. You think you can hide. I am going to chop you into pieces." I looked into the camera lens. "Did you hear that?" I asked the audience, my voice calm and raspy. That is the voice of a woman who just realized her investment is about to expire. I clicked the mouse and played the audio file from the USB drive again. Sam's voice filled the room, mixing with Emily's screams from the hallway. She is the architect. She supplies the poison. I let the past and the present collide on the stream, the confession of a dead man overlaid with the violence of his killer. It was a symphony of evidence. The wall next to the door frame buckled. Plaster dust exploded into the hallway. Emily kicked the weakened studs. The entire frame shifted. The steel door I had reinforced was still solid, but the house around it was failing. She had found the weak point. She was coming through the wall itself. I stood up and moved the laptop to the highest shelf in the corner. I angled it down so it captured the entire room. I wanted a wide shot. I wanted there to be no ambiguity about what happened next. I made sure the red recording light was visible. I made sure the chat feed was scrolling on the side, a waterfall of witnesses. The wall gave way with a tearing crash. A hole the size of a person opened up next to the door. Emily stepped through the debris. She looked like a demon rising from hell. Her red dress was torn and blackened with soot. Her face was smeared with ash and sweat, her eyes white and manic in the gloom. She dragged the axe behind her, the metal scraping against the linoleum floor. She was coughing, choking on the thick smoke that billowed in behind her, but her focus was absolute. She spotted me standing by the desk. A twisted smile broke across her face, revealing teeth that looked too white in the darkness. "There you are," she wheezed. She raised the axe. Her arms were shaking from exhaustion, but she held it high, ready to bring it down. She took a step toward me. "You should have just died, Walter," she whispered. "It would have been so much easier." She tensed her muscles, preparing to swing. I didn't move. I didn't raise my hands. I just pointed a single finger at the shelf behind me. "Smile, Emily," I said. "You are on the air." She frowned, confused. Her eyes followed my finger. She looked up at the shelf. She saw the laptop. She saw the screen glowing bright in the smoke-filled room. She saw the video feed. She saw herself standing there, axe raised, covered in soot. She saw the little red icon that said, "Live." And she saw the number next to it. 25,000 viewers. The axe stopped at the top of its arc. Her entire body went rigid. She stared at the screen, her brain trying to process what she was seeing. She saw the comments scrolling so fast they were a blur. "Put the axe down. We see you. Police are outside. She is insane." The reality of the digital age crashed into her analog violence. She wasn't in a dark hole anymore. She was on every phone and computer screen in the neighborhood. She was viral. Her grip on the axe loosened. The head dropped a few inches. Her eyes went wide with a dawning horror that had nothing to do with the fire. It was the horror of exposure, the horror of a narcissist realizing the mirror had been turned outward. "What is that?" she croaked, her voice trembling. "That is the world watching you," I said. "That is your network falling apart. That is Vinny seeing you fail. That is the police recording your confession." She lowered the axe until the head rested on the floor. She took a step back, shaking her head. "No," she whispered. "No, you didn't. You don't know how to do that. You are just an old man." "I am an engineer, Emily," I said, stepping forward, "and I just dismantled your life." The sound of sirens rose to a deafening wail outside. Red and blue lights flashed through the hole in the wall, illuminating the smoke with strobes of emergency. Tires screeched in the driveway. Voices shouted through bullhorns. "This is the police. Come out with your hands up." Emily looked at the window, then at the door, then at me. The fight drained out of her. She wasn't a monster anymore. She was just a woman caught in a trap of her own making. She looked at the laptop screen one last time, seeing the undeniable proof of her guilt broadcast to the universe. She dropped the axe. It clanged loudly on the floor. She covered her face with her soot-stained hands and began to scream. It wasn't a scream of anger. It was a scream of total defeat. I walked past her. I didn't look back. I picked up the laptop. "I am signing off now," I said to the camera. "The authorities are here." I ended the stream. I walked through the hole in the wall into the hallway. The heat was intense. The living room was an inferno. I could see the front door standing open. I walked toward the flashing lights and the fresh air, leaving the fire and the killer behind me. The night air was filled with the chaotic symphony of justice as red and blue lights painted the smoke-filled street in violent strobes. I sat on the back bumper of an ambulance, a gray wool blanket draped over my shoulders, watching the finale of the tragedy my family had written. The SWAT team did not knock. They swarmed through the front door and the hole in the wall, moving with the precision of a machine designed to dismantle chaos. I heard shouting from inside, but it was brief. The resistance had been broken long before the first boot kicked in the door. Emily was the first to emerge. She was flanked by 2 officers, her hands cuffed behind her back. The red dress that she had worn like armor was now a tattered rag stained with soot and drywall dust. She didn't look like a mastermind anymore. She didn't look like the architect of a murder ring. She looked small and broken, her eyes darting wildly around the crowd of neighbors who had gathered behind the police tape. When she saw me sitting there alive and calm, she stopped. She tried to lunge toward me, her face twisting into a mask of pure venom, but the officers held her firm. She screamed something unintelligible, a raw sound of hate that was cut short as they shoved her into the back of a squad car. Next came the fake doctor. He was limping, favoring the leg I had kicked and clutching his bandaged hand. He wasn't screaming. He was looking at the ground, trying to hide his face from the cameras. He knew his career as a forger and a thug was over. Then they brought out Esther and Trey, my wife and my son. Esther was hysterical. She was screaming about her rug, about the fire, about how she was a victim in all of this. She didn't seem to realize she was in handcuffs. She looked at the burning house, then at me, and her eyes widened in confusion. She expected me to fix it. She expected me to step in and tell the officers it was all a mistake, because that is what I had always done. I had always fixed their messes. But I just pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders and looked away. Trey was weeping openly, his head hanging low. He didn't look at me. He couldn't. The shame was finally heavier than his greed. I gave my statement to the detective, a woman with sharp eyes who had watched my live stream. She took the USB drive into evidence, handling it like it was a holy relic. She told me that they had already raided Emily's apartment and found a cache of chemicals. They had found the rest of the thallium. It was over. The network was burned. The next morning I sat in an interrogation room at the precinct. It wasn't me being interrogated. I was there because I had requested one final meeting before they were processed. I needed to finish it. I needed to twist the knife one last time, not out of cruelty, but out of a need for absolute closure. They brought them in one by one, handcuffed to the table. Esther, Trey, and Emily. They sat in a row looking like the survivors of a shipwreck. They looked at me with a mix of fear and lingering defiance. "You ruined us!" Esther spat, her voice hoarse from screaming. "You burned down our house. You sent us to jail. I hope you are happy, Walter. You are a homeless old man now. You have nothing." I placed a folder on the metal table. I opened it slowly, smoothing out the papers. "I didn't burn down the house, Esther," I said, my voice calm. "You did, and you didn't burn down our house. You burned down a property belonging to the Sampson Rivers Youth Foundation." Esther blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" I leaned forward. "I donated the house to Sam's charity 10 years ago," I said. "I have been paying rent to the foundation every month. The deed isn't in my name. It hasn't been for a decade. I wanted to make sure that when I died, the house would go to help kids who actually wanted to build a future, not greedy relatives." Trey looked up, his eyes wide. You don't own the house." "No," I said. "And that land sale I talked about, the $2 million. That was a lie. I don't own that land either. I never did. I just needed to see if you would kill me for it. And you passed that test with flying colors." Emily laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "So you are broke." I was right. You are just a pathetic, broke old man. We went to jail for nothing." I smiled. It was the smile of a man holding a royal flush. Not quite, Emily. I didn't say I was broke. I said I didn't own the house. I pulled another document from the folder. It was a deed. A real one. "I own the building you live in, Emily," I said. "The Skyview Towers. The apartment complex where you and Trey rented that overpriced penthouse. The one you bragged about. I bought the building 5 years ago through a holding company." Her jaw dropped. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking like a ghost. You are the landlord," she whispered. I nodded. "Yes. Every time you paid rent late, every time you complained about the maintenance, you were complaining to me. I own the coffee shop on the ground floor too. I own the parking garage." I pulled out a bank statement. The balance was highlighted in yellow. $4,500,000. "And this," I said, sliding the paper across the table toward them. "This is the accumulated royalties from 3 mechanical engineering patents I sold to Detroit in 2005. I didn't retire because I was tired. I retired because I was making $60,000 a month doing nothing." Esther stared at the number, stared at the Her hands started to shake. She reached out to touch the paper as if it were a mirage. $4 million, she gasped. "Walter, we are rich." I snatched the paper back. "I am rich, Esther," I corrected her. "You are indigent. You have nothing. The house is gone. Your savings are gone because you let your son steal them, and you are going to prison for attempted murder and arson." Trey started to cry again, loud, heaving sobs. "Dad, please. I didn't know. If I had known—" "If you had known, you would have killed me sooner," I said, my voice hard as iron. "You wouldn't have used poison. You would have pushed me down the stairs 5 years ago." I stood up, gathering my papers. "I just wanted you to know what you lost," I said, looking at them one last time. "You didn't just lose a father and a husband. You lost a lottery ticket. And you lost it because you were too busy looking down on me to see what I was actually worth." I walked to the door. "Goodbye," I said. "Don't call me. I won't answer." I walked out of the interrogation room, leaving them screaming my name, leaving them drowning in the realization of their own stupidity. I walked out of the station and into the bright, harsh sunlight of the morning. I felt light, weightless. The burden of 40 years of lies and ungratefulness had been lifted. A month later, I stood in the quiet section of the cemetery where the grass was green and the oak trees cast cool shadows. I was wearing a new suit. It fit perfectly. I held a bouquet of fresh sunflowers in one hand and the red USB drive in the other. I knelt in front of Sam's headstone. The granite was cold and smooth. "We got them, Sam," I whispered. "We got them all. The network is gone." The police rounded up 6 other women in 3 counties. "You saved a lot of lives, my friend." I dug a small hole in the soft earth right next to the headstone. I placed the red USB drive inside and covered it up. It belonged with him. It was his final testament, his final act of friendship. "Rest easy, Sam," I said, patting the earth. "I will take it from here." I stood up and walked back to the parking lot. My old blue truck was parked there next to a sleek black sedan I had bought yesterday. But I walked past the sedan. I got into the truck. It smelled of oil and hard work. It smelled like me. I started the engine. It coughed once, then roared to life, a stubborn, reliable sound. I checked my phone. A notification from the bank popped up. Interest payment received $12,000. I smiled. I put the phone on the dashboard. I had no destination. I had no schedule. I had no family to weigh me down. I had a full tank of gas, a healthy heart, thanks to the treatment, and $4.5 million to burn. I shifted into gear and pulled out onto the highway. The road stretched out ahead of me, endless and open. I was Walter Jefferson. I was a survivor. And for the first time in my life, I was truly free. Here is the moral lesson and call to action to conclude the story. I learned that silence is not weakness and patience is not surrender. For 40 years, I let my family mistake my kindness for stupidity. But when the time came, I showed them that the quietest man in the room is often the most dangerous. True family isn't defined by blood. It is defined by loyalty, respect, and who stands by you when the fire starts. If you are holding on to toxic people just because they share your last name, let them go. Your peace, your dignity, and your life are worth far more than their approval. Never apologize for surviving. If you enjoyed this story of justice, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about truth and retribution. Tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven them or would you have walked away just like I did?